I
There we
don't
go.
mind it.
Well,
Pretty still.
Carl, you might be going off on a tangent now, but we're live. We're live.
Okay.
So I know you were going like deep into thought, but it's time to do a podcast.
Okay, let's get on with this podcast.
So welcome to the Wiki Weekdays podcast. I am your host for this week, Lucas Holland, and I am joined as ever by my illustrious co-host, Karl Smallwood. And for some reason I stole your intro for me. It's normally I'm like the lovely Karl Smallwood.
Lucas, it's our intro. Do you like the Bugs Bunny meme where he's just like the hammer and sickle over and he's like our meme. It's like let's go.
But of course, on the Wiki Weekdays podcast, both Carl and I bring a wiki, normally from pop culture, for a discussion and just generally try to have an entertaining conversation and, bring you some fun times for an hour or two during the podcast.
Like, you've taken a week off and you sound so rusty. Like your birthday must have been like an absolute riot by the sounds of it. You sound so
Carl, I
chilled.
watched a lot of Squid Game.
Oh man, how far are you into the squidliest of games?
The thing is, we've got one episode left because I'm not going to spoil anything from season 2. But what I will say is I know, without watching the last episode, that season 2 and 3 were filmed at the same time.
So you know it's coming out soon, right?
But also I know that when we were like, oh, there must be a few episodes left. How long have we got left? Oh, one episode. Oh, this has been split. This is one season split into 2 parts. Then, right? It's like I don't want you to say anything because I know you've seen it, but like this is me just speculating. But it's like we felt like there was probably a good 4 or 5 episodes left. Check Netflix, and it's like you've got one episode left.
I had the exact same thing, but all I'm going to ask is like because this is like a mistake that happened that got left in. But one of the people in the show suffered back issues. And it's player 120 because they were carrying the entire fucking season. Well, player 120 is it's the trans character.
Oh right, yeah, they've been really good.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Okay, they injured the back carrying the entire fucking season on their shoulder.
You don't think that Thanos guy has been carrying it the entire time?
So you know what? I hate him, and which means he's doing his job as an actor.
Exactly right. It's like he's one of those characters where like I'm not going to spoil anything. He's one of those characters where every time he's on screen, he's being annoying as shit, which means that he's probably doing a good job of playing the exact role he was meant to play.
He's doing his job as well. I've never seen He's the one as well. He's acting so much with his face. Of just like all of his facial animations are fucking hilarious. Like we all know that guy.
Yeah.
We know that guy, but we won't spoil Squid Game.
Walking with like his entire 3 bodies worth of animation.
Yeah, like I've never seen a person move with 2 frames of animation.
It's like he's got more than one person's worth of movement inside of that body.
Yeah. It's like Elena's idle animation in like Street Fighter 3, I think it is, where she's got like 120 frames of her idle pose. Like, why did you do this?
That man cannot stop moving. But anyway, moving on to like, the real intro, Carl. We've done our little bit of like blabber jabber before the beginning, but
to establish that with people and with friends, and
we are indeed. Well, we pretend to be for the sake of camera, yes.
Like off camera, it's just like never text me.
Carl mentioned that it was my birthday. It was my birthday yesterday, and even though I was like, right, New Year, I'm going to be better with which wiki won this week, it was my birthday and I was off work and I forgot to post the poll.
You know what? As excuses go, that's about as good as it gets.
It's like, look, I was off work.
We talked about it on like your birthday stream.
What actually happened was I definitely said, oh, Carl, can you cover this while I'm off? And Carl did nothing about it, right?
Yeah, but I was like, you know what? That's Luke's fucking job. That's a mistake. But yeah.
It's just a mistake, don't worry, everyone, yes.
For anyone unfamiliar with the Which Wiki Won This Week gimmick we like to do, it is each and every week, at least each and every week, except for last week, we put a poll up in our Discord. You can find the link below, and you can just vote on which wiki you thought brought the best discussion. So not the subject that is of most interest to you, which subject you thought brought the best discussion, because there's plenty of times where we bring a subject that might not sound like the most interesting thing, but the discussion that arises from it can be quite interesting, and that's the gimmick of the show.
Yes, and I do hope while we're early in the podcast, anyone mentions like audio issues. We're both still haunted from a couple of weeks ago where like everyone just stopped watching after the first 15 minutes of the podcast because we were just all over the place.
And there's a good reason to be scared of stuff like that, because that can legit just kill channels in the crib.
Yes, yeah.
Like, there are so many things that YouTube never tells you, because it seems like it should be pretty common sense of just make good videos that sound and look decent. But you think the internet would forgive minor mistakes. It's that the internet does not.
No,
you literally get seconds when it comes to YouTube. If someone clicks on a video and there's a couple of seconds of dead silence or bad audio, they'll immediately click off. It's like Twitch streamers, right? Of how many Twitch streamers never get more than a single viewer, so they're just silent until they see the number pop up on Twitch and then start talking, and the number jumps off.
But they don't realise that there's actually a 30-second delay in that, so people have come in, seen a person doing something in complete silence, gone, this person is not entertaining, and bounced before they've even realised there was anyone watching in the first place.
Yeah, so if you want to find success online, or at least have a better chance of finding success online, follow the example of Thanos and just never shut the fuck up and never stop moving.
I mean, it keeps you captivated at least.
It does. Every second he's on screen, God, I fucking hate that guy. He wants to stick you in a shiv or something.
Oh, it's like when we talk about the best thing that you can do is at very least spark an emotion rather than none at all.
Even a bad emotion is still making people talk about you. It's people talk about bad movies, they talk about good movies, they talk about bad characters, they talk about good characters. No one's talking about the no-name character who just gets murked off screen second one, except for in Squid Game season 2, where the character that happens to is the hottest girl in the show. Which is kind of the point, I suppose. We could talk about that when we do eventually cover the Squidliest of games.
We can, which presumably will be soon. I don't know whether that'll be a podcast discussion or one we want to do for the weekend to put clips in of. We'll discuss that when I've watched the final episode, but yes. It may just end up being a podcast because we want to talk about Squid Game for 2 hours. I don't know. But yeah, just hopefully the audio is okay, and as I say, we're still both a bit squeamish about that a couple of weeks ago, because I've done entire streams on Twitch where someone's come in the last 5 minutes of a 4-hour stream and gone, that I can't really hear you over the game audio, and then I've gone and looked at the archives and I just can't hear myself talk for 4 hours. It's why did no one say a thing?
Nothing will ever be the story I heard about when I was in university doing media production. Because I did media theory, but I had a module on production to learn how to use a camera, which is why I can use this camera because it's the same kind. But they were telling us well, the first thing you got to do is make sure your camera's on. And you might think that seems like the most obvious thing in the world, but he brought in some footage and he put it on screen, and it was black, and you could just hear audio. He goes, well, what you're hearing now is people in a car on their way to the shoot.
Oh, and
it shows you the entire process. Yeah, it shows you in the car to check if it was on. And then it shows you the entire process of lining up the shot, and then they press the button and it just turns off. And goes,
yeah, I was going to say
that was going to be the shot for their degree, and it's no, because they went all the way.
The last thing that you see is them go right, and we can press record now. Boop.
Yep.
God.
And it was the final shot of their thesis. And unfortunately, he said, I found it funny. I gave them a week to go reshoot it because they went on location. They travelled an entire day to get there.
They can show the evidence of the fact that we did try and get the we put the work in, but literally you can see us line up the shot, and then it went the wrong way.
One of those things that can happen. It's something known as I think it's familiarity blindness. It's just something you do every day. Eventually, your mind starts to just fill in what it thinks you should see to save brain power, which is why, sometimes there's a statistic that most people crash their car 400 yards from their own house because you're so used to that trip. That's when you'll normally pull out and just get sideswiped.
You just go into autopilot mode, right?
Yeah.
So you're less situationally aware.
And it's saying something like recording, isn't it? Of how many times have we just not bothered syncing up audio or checking audio because we're so used to just turning it on and it working because we've not changed anything.
That's the thing, right? And from our simple setup of just a mic on either end and me using OBS's audio mixer, all I have is a couple of bars for feedback, and I go, those bars on my end look about the same. And therefore I assume it's fine. And then sometimes that on the other person's end, for whatever reason, through whatever, happenings, it doesn't sound the same to them as what I would predict looking at those audio mixer levels.
Which is not ideal, but Lucas, we have one more gimmick to promote. There's one gimmick we did remember to do, because it doesn't require much effort from ourselves, and that is Pet of the Week.
Yeah, we have a rolling weekly contest where we just do Pet of the Week over on our Discord. If you are a patron of any level, you can post pictures of pets, and like the community who, anyone in our Discord then can vote on Pet of the Week by just reacting to different images and saying which ones are your favorite. And this week, the Pet of the Week is, I believe, Aron. I want to say, just based off the text of the name, I want to pronounce it Aron.
I think it's Aaron.
It might be Aaron, but it looks like Aron. Aron. Either way, a very lovely looking dog with some big doe eyes there.
Yeah, it's a good friend of ours. His family had boxers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget the story he told me of one day he came in and his dog had eaten the entire bag of flour. And he had the picture when they found it, and it looks like a fucking demon.
And
it's just covered in the flour. It's like a crime scene. He went, that poor dog, because he had to poop it out.
I was going to say, I remember the story of it just having to poop it out the other end.
Because obviously it turned to dough in its stomach, and it was fine, but that was 4 days of it looking very sorry for itself.
That scale of whether how liquid to solid is your poop, and it was just on the extreme end. Oh, but yes, that is an excellent Pet of the Week picture right there. And as always, the Pet of the Week picture will also be featured during our break for the podcast. Get that big, lovely zoom in to take up the entire screen. But yes.
Which is great, because the lower quality of the photo, the funnier that break screen will be.
Yeah, we do encourage any pets of any kind. We've had cows and lizards and frogs and cats and dogs and others, and we just, any pet you've got that looks cute, or anyone if you've got a friend's pet that you want to post or anything like that, because I'm aware that obviously the same people are going to be posting their own pets over and over, and they might not want to feel like they can spam or anything. If you've got family pets or friends' pets and stuff, we just don't want people to be Googling cutest dog picture ever and just posting it, right?
I'm waiting for the day someone posts a picture of them in the fursuit. It's going to happen eventually, right? Just law of averages.
Why would you say that? Now people are going to be thinking about it.
I'm tempting fate, Lucas.
Well, speaking of tempting fate, Carl, I'm going to tempt fate by saying that maybe next week, if we're lucky, and people want to be lovely out there and support us, then maybe next week might be a special podcast.
Oh yes, because we are close to that tier on our Patreon, aren't we? Look at that.
We are indeed.
You can tell how in sync we are. You can tell we don't like each other, but we do work well together.
We need to stop making this joke. It's gonna start becoming pervasive. But yes,
the thing is that the most common running gag with internet personalities of that they actually fucking hate each other in real life, or they're gay? It's one or the other, right?
I don't think it's the most pervasive, because you'd be surprised how many content creators actually aren't friends. So I don't think a lot of those people make those jokes, because a lot of the times they aren't friends. Obviously, you go watch Mr. Beast or whatever.
He doesn't have friends. He doesn't have a life.
Well, that's what I mean. He makes content with a lot of people, but he makes content with them.
He's the clearest example of someone I think selling their soul, because if you look into his eyes, there is no soul there. There is only room for more content.
And we did just get a lovely super chat from Charlie, a very generous super chat.
Name.
Saying, how much would it cost to get a wiki weekend about Wikipedia? And
we've got suggestions, but I'm not sure how big. Okay, I've read the Wikipedia page of Wikipedia, but I don't know what it said.
Right.
I think everyone's read the Wikipedia page on Wikipedia, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess it would maybe be that's a subscriber special or something, right?
Maybe we could do that as a Patreon exclusive at some point or something like that, maybe. But we do appreciate the super chat.
There's also as well the one of the guest hosts that I'd want to reach out to at some point. Once we reach that tier and get to a certain point of success, where we can start swing our dick around, is the depths of Wikipedia.
Oh, okay. I thought you were just going to say the founder of Wikipedia themselves.
Well, Jimmy Wales seems like a nice enough dude. I'm sure he'd do it.
I mean,
if if we compensated him fairly or reached out.
I have absolutely zero like knowledge or real I've never really seen any videos or interviews or anything with the creator of I was about to say Wiki Weekends of Wikipedia, but I can't imagine they'd be that nasty a person. But I would like to give them the question of why even though we donate money every year, why the next year do you promise that this is the last time you're going to beg us for money? I understand there's running costs in Wikipedia, but I get annoyed that every time they ask for money, it's like, we swear this will keep Wikipedia running forever if we get to this amount.
Well, if you read it, what they say is if everybody reading this gave this amount, we would have funding for 20 years because how many people read Wikipedia at any given time? That is true. And their numbers bear out that only a small percentage of people give. As we know, Lucas, as content creators, you do a Patreon shout out or something like that, and it's a fraction of a percent who actually follow through with it. Same for Wikipedia.
Yeah, and back to our Patreon, we are, I think, less than £30 a month away from hitting our first goal of getting guest podcasts going. We have a guest podcast already recorded and ready to go live the week that we hit that goal. That'll be the podcast for that week. So if we hit that this week, for example, next week we could have a guest podcast, and we will, of course,
as well.
I was going to say we will read out any super chats that we get during the podcast when we can. And Karl, I think it's probably just a good way, unless that was a very important thing you were going to say, to segue into.
No, I was just going to say I'm free and easy as well because I arranged the guests for the first, the ones we already recorded. So it's your job to find a guest for the next one.
I've already reached out to. I think about 7-8 different people that I've emailed that have blanked me so far over the past week and a half. I have already been thinking of people that are freelancers and stuff that I've been trying to email and see if they'll work with us. But I appreciate that I am basically just cold calling people that don't know who we fucking are at this point.
And annoyingly, we can't really use Twitter anymore because no fuckers will be using Twitter. Personally, I'm using it till next week to promote my birthday stream next week, and then I'm probably going to just never post on that site again.
Honestly, the only reason I go on Twitter anymore is to either share stuff that you've tagged me in or tag you in something because you're not on Blue Sky.
Yeah. Maybe I'll have to get a Blue Sky account at some point so we can start swinging around over there
Karl,
and get people in.
The owner of Twitter is now doing Roman salutes in the middle of inauguration speeches.
It's
time to get off that platform.
I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm sure he doesn't have millions and millions of dollars worth of investment in his own public image and has an entire team of people. And I'm sure he didn't rehearse that speech and have someone looking and go, "You're a fucking idiot."
There is a certain amount of cocaine that will make you ignore your publicists and everything they tell you. Yeah. And I think on that day, he probably had enough.
Yeah, he's celebratory cocaine.
Yeah.
It's so weird how Donald Trump is completely teetotal, right? He's just raw dogging that shit.
There's no way.
No, he's completely...
he's got bleach in his veins, Karl. He's shooting up bleach and you're telling me he's teetotal.
Completely teetotal. That's it. He's raw dogging insanity. Wild, right? Let's move on now, Lucas. Actually, let's move back. So it was your birthday yesterday, right?
It was.
And what year were you born?
I was born in 1992.
So I thought we'd take a trip back in time, Lucas, to 1992.
Okay.
And we're now on the Wikipedia page for 1992 in video games. So I would like to ask a question for the folks at home and the folks watching live right now or listening after the fact. Let us know how many of these things we're about to discuss you're familiar with, because everything we're going to mention is exactly as old as Lucas is.
And obviously, I don't know the exact timelines between North American and European dates and Japanese dates, but I do know that 1992, I think in Europe is when the Super Nintendo might have come out. If not a lot of early Super Nintendo absolute bangers, including Super Mario World and Link to the Past are both 1992, at least in some territories.
So this is just going to be like, us going through a series of things in relation to gaming that are as old as you are. And how old do you feel, Lucas? Because I know that's like a common trend online, isn't it? Of like the 90s were 30 years ago, crumble to dust. Do you feel old? Do you feel good?
Not really. And I think a large contributor as that is obviously just not having children and being in your 30s. I think majority of people a generation before had kids in your 30s at that point, because it's generally just like what people did, right? And now a lot of like a big trend among millennials is, nah, fuck that shit.
Yeah, when my dad was my age, he had 3 kids and drove a bus.
So like, I don't feel old. I don't necessarily not feel like I'm in my 30s, because I don't know what that should or shouldn't feel like, but I don't feel old. I don't feel like much different than I felt in my 20s, because there's not that much that's ostensibly changed. And like I mentioned not long ago that like I started working back at Nando's, and quite a lot of people commented that they did not think I was in my 30s at all, because I don't act that way. I don't feel or act much different than I did like 10 years ago.
The thing is, well, you've got like a cheat code where you can at any point literally shave years off your face.
I mean, that's true, yeah.
Yeah, you always have the option to like, you know what, I want to look 5 years younger. I don't have that option. I don't have that option. I've just got a hope that my hair stays on my head. Because can you imagine if I was fucking bald? How much like an egg would I look?
And like, that's the other thing is, right, like I probably would just be like, I don't give a shit, I'll wear a wig. But like, if I didn't go down that route, I think I would look fine if I was just the bald head beard combo. Like, I can grow a good enough beard that I could do it that way.
I can't grow a good beard, that'd be the problem. But yeah, it's, for context, I am 1 year older than Lucas. So, but I'm not 34 until next week. So this is one time we're both 33 years old.
Yeah, there's like a week and a half where we're both technically the same age.
But I wasn't born in the same year, because that year was 1992. So, 1992 saw many sequels and prequels to video games, such as, and just stop me if any of these like jump out at you as games that you've played or you're familiar with. Dragon Quest V. We're all up to 5. Final Fantasy V. Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
Okay, yeah, that's one of the first big ones then that I really enjoyed. Sonic the Hedgehog. I had, or like my dad had a Master System 2, which is just a, sleeker version of the Master System 1. It's not a new console or anything. But I had that with a pre-built Sonic the Hedgehog 1 in there, the 8-bit version.
Ooh.
Which, like, that's one way to blow Sega fans' minds. When I tell them that my version of Sonic growing up was the 8-bit Sonic, they're like...
Yeah. Wait, what? So, yeah.
Most people don't even know there is an 8-bit Sonic, but yes,
well, the one that I used to freak people out, or like people go, wait, how fucking old are you? Is I had a black and white TV.
God.
Like in my bedroom, because it was just an old one from a family friend, and I still tell the story of like the reason I'm scared of the water is because the first time I watched Jaws when I was too young at night on a black and white TV.
It's so funny though, isn't it? Because the amount of times where you'll hear adults go, oh, well, my kid's too young to be watching X and Y. And then you go, okay, so did you watch, like, horror movies as a kid? Oh, yeah, when I was way too young. I watched, like, Halloween when I was 8 years old, and it scared the shit out of me. It's like, yeah, it's just a general way of life, right? Like, everyone watches and consumes media when they're probably way younger than they should be.
The only thing I'll say about that is that, especially in regards to video games, the topic of today's conversation, is that there's a lot more visual fidelity on the violence, because one of the other games released in 1992, in addition to Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition, Super Mario Land 2, The 6 Golden Coins, and Super Mario Kart, was the launch of several new franchises, including Art of Fighting, which was the precursor to Fatal Fury.
Mm-hmm.
I think, or like Fatal Fury is what it became. Lethal Enforcers, Mortal Kombat.
I mean, fair, obviously.
Lucas, I'm older than Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, and I was going to say, by the way, that, going back to Sonic 2, I then played Sonic 2 after, like, having Sonic the Hedgehog 8-bit, and Sonic 2 blew my mind. And that is, like, that's really when Sonic the Hedgehog became, like, the Sonic the Hedgehog game. Like the first one's decent, but like Sonic 2 is when they really like fucking
it's when they like nailed the formula of what Sonic was. But yeah, Lucas.
Yeah.
So far, you are as old as Mortal Kombat. And this is the funny thing, because I think Conan, the Barbarian, just launched as like a character for Mortal Kombat 1. And it's been really funny to see like younger fans of a series like, who the fuck cares about Conan? Like,
to be fair,
who the hell's this?
I don't give a shit about Conan. He's from the 80s, right?
But if you were born in the 80s, Mortal Kombat came out in 92. Exactly right. Yeah. That's who cares about Conan the Barbarian? I don't know. The people who played the first Mortal Kombat game.
Yes, yeah, totally. And I do appreciate that they go for like a gambit of characters, but they do go for mostly characters that clearly the developers grew up with. They have like a Homelander in there and stuff, but most of the guest characters they've brought in over the past 3 Mortal Kombat games have been 80s characters.
Why not though? Right?
Well, yeah, but I do realise why a Mortal Kombat fan base would be like, hey, who the fuck are these people? Because most of them are older than me.
But the thing about the Conan one, though, is that everyone's like, they were annoyed that he was going to be who's this? Then they saw his gameplay. Well, actually, no, this is 6. He can throw his teammates at you.
And that's where I think that it shouldn't matter that much, because as long as they're fun in the game and cool, like, it should still be a way to get new people into that character, right?
Yeah, is the game... Well, that's the idea, right? Like, sometimes it'll be a character that people like, other times it'll be a character who's a bit more obscure. Like, Spawn was an obscure pick, but he was a very hotly requested character. Like, not many people... Like, people know Spawn is, but people weren't like, oh my god, fucking Spawn, let's go. But put him into Mortal Kombat, introduced the character to an entirely new group of people.
You just didn't want to be within smelling distance of anyone who wanted Spawn in the game. That's all.
You wouldn't know.
Carl and I just specifically dunk on Spawn because Spawn fans are just like
insufferable. They act like everyone. They act like he's bigger than Superman.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't mind if you like the character.
I liked the character when I'd first seen him in Soul Calibur 2.
Yeah. It's like, it's fine to like the character, but just live in the reality that we do and admit that you liking him does not trump reality.
Yeah, he's not as big as Batman is. I'm sorry. He's also like not as cool as Batman is. I'm also sorry.
It's like Digimon fans, isn't it? Where it's okay if you like Digimon, but you can't. But when they get mad, like, no, it's bigger than Pokemon. It literally quantifiably isn't.
No, but it's way better than Pokemon. It's like, but that's an opinion.
That's an opinion.
You're allowed to have that as an opinion, but you can't say it as fact.
I like we're on the same page there. It's weird that we're enemies. The year's highest grossing video game worldwide was Capcom's arcade fighting game Street Fighter 2 for the 2nd year in a row, whilst also being the year's highest grossing entertainment product, period.
Is that because it also had the movie? Or was that like 94?
Just Street Fighter 2 as a whole was the biggest game for the 2nd year, and that's how often does that happen? It's not often that something is the biggest thing in the world.
Yeah, I mean,
years on a bounce.
It's not only the new thing. Occasionally, but if for example, Call of Duty didn't release annually, Call of Duties that pop off might be
potentially.
But like, I imagine Grand Theft Auto 6, whatever year that comes out with, whether it gets delayed out of this year or not, like
it'll probably be the next year's highest grossing video game. But entertainment products, that's all entertainment.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah.
It also mentions that the best-selling home console system was the Game Boy for the 3rd year in a row, while the year's best-selling home video games were Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Sega Mega Drive / Genesis and the Super NES port of Street Fighter 2. So Street Fighter 2 got both.
Yeah. And
Street Fighter was massive back in the day.
Street Fighter was the thing, but then Mortal Kombat started coming out, right?
It came out, started eating some of its dinner.
Yeah.
And shame we'll never get that crossover.
We might do at some point.
We're still waiting on Tekken versus Street Fighter.
Is it Tekken Street? Yeah, we got Street Fighter cross Tekken. Harada's admitted, he's like, yeah, that's not happening.
Probably not now.
Like, he's straight up said in more recent years, he's like, yeah, we tried, but it's not.
Do you know what? They put Akuma in.
You know what? It's been 10 years, get over it. We know we said we'd make it, but we tried and it didn't work.
Yeah, we want to put Clive in instead.
And yeah, one thing you mentioned with Game Boy being like massive for 3 years on the bounce, like people forget that like obviously Pokemania and Pokemon built like the renaissance of the Game Boy, so to speak, in terms of sales, but
they are the bricks upon which the Nintendo empire is built. Yes,
they are.
They're literally just Game Boys.
But you know, speaking of bricks, like fucking Tetris was selling Game Boys for years.
Tetris was, yes. Like it's you know, everyone watching this, listening to this right now is probably doing so either on or with a device within arm's reach that makes an old Game Boy look like laughable, right?
Yeah,
but it cannot be overstated how just groundbreaking the idea of just it's a device you can hold in your hands that plays games.
And I know there was a release of Tetris before Game Boy, but it was like on a like PC that wasn't very popular or something in like Russia or something. I don't really know, but Game Boy was like the release of Tetris.
Yeah, it was like
and then
like
the NES version was also there as well, right?
Tetris is probably like the most released thing ever. It's
like if you count every different type of Tetris.
No,
because
Doom.
That's the thing is like Doom 1 is still when they release it Doom, but when they release Tetris, they don't really release like classic
the original
Tetris anymore.
Yeah. That's, I as soon as I said that, I went, no, it's Doom because they've got Doom the game running on a fucking like pregnancy test.
Yeah, and like
see, they run on a crab. They run Doom on a crab, or theoretically,
right.
Yeah, they got like a bunch of crabs to like emulate a bit of data or something. They went, well, theoretically, we could use the byte that they make. Like the processing power of like this many crabs can create this much of Doom. Well, so if we had like 1 billion crabs, we could make Doom on crab.
In theory, you could also get like a box that's like 1 foot by 1 foot and put a crab in it, and then lay that like however many pixels over you need for Doom. And you could recreate Doom in pixels with crabs.
Yeah, people have done it. Like, it's probably the singular most ported thing in existence, and that's a topic for another day. But people in chat right now are saying something, or they're revealing how old they are in terms of the media that was released in the year they were born. So yeah, folks at home, like let us know, like how old are you? But don't say how old you are. Tell us the thing that was released in the year that you were born that was most popular or that you recognize the most.
Yeah, like either something that was super popular or your favorite thing from the year you were born. Let us know.
So we have like a list here of like the top rated games of that year. But we'll get. I think we should go to that last. Well, because before we do that, we should probably go on to the games that were actually released.
I want to point out the fact that you've mentioned not even all of the games from that year. No, I would presume, and
no, because that was just that's the intro to the Wiki article.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like that's already one of the best gaming years I can think of. If that was a list of games and you went like rate this year in video gaming, you'd be like, yeah, 10 out of 10.
Yeah. So what I've got up now, because the order of the page is a bit like skew with, at least in terms of the conversation we'd want to have. So I'll go back up to top rated games after we've gone through the games themselves. We also have events and hardware releases. So would you want to go through the games first, the events first, or the hardware releases?
Well, I was just going to quickly mention, before we go into those things.
Okay.
Just shout out to 1992 as well, because that was the first year that it wasn't that the internet was existed, but it was like the first time an internet like browser was created, right?
I'm not sure because we're on the page of video games.
Like 1992 is often seen as like the establishment of the internet.
I know like there's some point in the 90s where they say this is like this was it. This was like ground zero for this generation of after this date you did not grow up in a world without like interconnected the information superhighway as they called it back then.
Yeah, God.
I remember they used to call it that in the news, and it's like they used to have like books of like people surfing on keyboards, like what?
Or like the BBC documentaries you see of, well, what you need to know about the internet superhighway is.
I think we should call it that again.
We can't call it a superhighway while we've got like fucking Nazis on Twitter.
We don't have to call it like that. Used to be the public, the internet's town square. We can take that off it. It's 4chan, right? It is now.
Yeah.
It's like, Joe, have you got any favorite name or alternate names for sites? Because are you familiar with Mumsnet at all? Which is like a wiki page that I'd love to cover, but it's way too depressing.
God.
So Mumsnet, on the surface, sounds like a pretty innocuous
You would
place.
think it's like a place where mums go to share advice or stories or something, yeah.
It's an online forum for like new and expecting mothers to share advice and stories. The problem is that are you familiar with like WhatsApp mums, where they're just really, really susceptible to like scams and conspiracy theories? And I imagine, Lucas, a bunch of mums with nothing better to do on the internet all day, sharing stories and like trying to one up each other. And as a result, it's one of the most toxic places on the internet. To the point where it's like where a lot of like Graham Linehan, it's where he got a lot of his early grassroots support for his like anti-trans stuff. So the nickname I've heard for Mumsnet is Prosecco Stormfront. Stormfront being the neo-Nazi website. Okay. Let's move on. So the games that were released in January, March, and these are in alphabetical order now. So we have the Addams Family for the Game Boy and the NES. I feel that's a game I probably played at some point.
I can't remember whether it's the Addams Family or Fester's Quest that's the good one, because one's meant to be really bad and one's meant to be really good.
Mm-hmm. Because I recently digging out a bunch. This what like reminded me of this. I was posting a group chat yesterday. If I was clearing out some old games and stuff to put on display in my house, and I didn't realise that I've got some of the games that I've got for like the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance, which are decades old at this point, and worth a fucking fortune. I've got a copy of like Ruby for the Game Boy Advance.
Carl, maybe you should save part of that story for something I want to talk about later.
Okay, no problem.
So because that may have inspired something that I chose for a wiki page.
We were both inspired. It's almost like we talk out of this. It's weird that we're enemies. So there's a couple other games here. We've got Die Hard. There was a Die Hard game for the NES. Dirty Larry, Renegade Cop. And just the cover of that is amazing. It's just a man with the most flat top haircut you've ever seen, firing two guns, like a real cop. Monster in My Pocket for the NES. Pinball Jam.
And that's 4 years before Pokemon happened.
Yep. Pit Fighter. Prince of Persia for the Game Boy. So it was released before that. That's the Game Boy port. We did an episode on Prince of Persia. There's a Wheel of Fortune game. Super Adventure Island. Super Fantasy Zone. Dragon Ball Z. Legend of the Super Saiyan for the SNES.
And again, I don't remember because there's so many like old school Dragon Ball spin-off games that
there's like 500.
Good and bad. And one of my favorite things looking back as someone who didn't really play any of them before Budokai is that obviously the manga was so far ahead. Is that like back in the 90s they were releasing the Buu saga in the manga, or maybe even potentially in the anime in Japan. And like we were just getting early Dragon Ball Z, so people were seeing like Buu Saga stuff in the video games and being, the fuck is this stuff?
Yep, it's wild, isn't it? And just that's one of the weirder things. Like there's been Dragon Ball games for basically as long as there's been gaming. As soon as they like made consoles with enough fidelity to render Goku's hairstyle, they were putting him into video games.
Oh god, that wasn't until the PS4, Carl.
It wasn't, and it still looks crap. Well, like, so all the games, this January through March, I should say. We had a Terminator game. PGA Golf, like golf games. I remember playing a lot of golf games for some reason because they were always like free on the PC and cornflakes.
Yeah, yeah.
We'd always get like shitty like golf games.
Mm-hmm. All the time, man.
Well, yeah, the first couple of months of 1992, in which you were born, weren't that great. So February, Lucas, was looking pretty dry. The only game I recognise here that's pretty decent, or one we might know, is Tiny Toons Adventures, Babs' Big Break. Game Boy, which I did play.
Like, I'm presuming this is still that period, you know, for the longest period of time, until like maybe 360 era video games didn't really mess around with releasing much outside of like holidays, right?
I'm not sure. It's as well. It should note that like they're releasing games to the NES and SNES simultaneously, so it's like the crossover.
Yeah, the Super Nintendo only launched in 91 or 92, depending on where you were in the world. So this is very early Super Nintendo.
Yeah, but the only thing released on your birthday, February 21st, 1992, was football frenzy for the
I think
Neo
you've
Geo.
got your months mixed up. It's January, my birthday.
January, doy. I was just thinking February because that's when my birthday is. Actually, there was nothing released on your birthday.
Yeah, I mean that does make sense because often my birthday, I think I was born on a Tuesday, but my birthday comes around the period of what they call Blue Monday, which is the saddest and like day of the year where people have the least amount of money.
Mm-hmm. Which is just not a good time, is it?
It's like the first Monday before, like, the last Monday, sorry, before the first payday of the year, where everyone's spent all their money over the holidays, and they've also gotten paid early for Christmas time. And then,
so it's like a 5-week gap before people get paid again, and
like,
most people are like, it's when people start to break their New Year's resolutions, so they get really disheartened by that. It's when a lot of people, like, break with traditions or like diets and stuff. So it's just generally not a good time.
No, so it's not the greatest day to like go and release a video game on and be like, give us your money.
Join was a good time to release a video game though, Lucas. May of that year, because in May of that year we saw the release of something that's very prescient to what happened in the news just the other day. Wolfenstein 3D. God.
No, Wolfenstein. Bring back more games where we just fucking melt Hitler.
Wolfenstein 3D. And then in June, we had a Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis video game. So another character who fucking hates Nazis.
I was going to say, at least we are keeping the tradition alive of like having video game shooters where we get to beat the shit out of Nazis. Like Machine Games, they have got that niche locked down. Same with the Sniper Elite games as well, where like Sniper Elite doesn't give a shit whether it's like game number 7 in the series. It's like, we're still going to put in a mission where you get to snipe Hitler's bollocks off.
I still think that's one of the funniest running gags in video games, where in every Sniper Elite game is a mission where you assassinate Hitler, but a lot of them are just like, it follows the same character or the same story. So they always have to say, actually, no, that was a clone or like a body double. We've actually super got him this time, though. It's definitely him this time.
They need to make up like the really vague excuse for why every single game is like, we've brought back another mission where you get to assassinate Hitler.
I still like. I think it was I think it's a high concept short film, maybe, or it's based on a short story prompt, something like that, where it's time travel in the future gets to a point where you can just go back and fuck around because they realize that it doesn't matter what you do because it's a fixed point in time. So it becomes a game to go back and assassinate Hitler in the most interesting way possible.
Imagine being Hitler, like just every single day of your life is just dodging peak time travel assassins like over and over again.
It was like then that led to someone else coming with an idea of, okay, the future's in danger, but there's only one person who knows how to deal with time assassins, and it's Hitler because he's dealt with so many of them. So got to go back and recruit him. But we move on now to July, September, and July 29th saw the release of Echo the Dolphin.
Oh my god.
And keep an eye on Fact Fiend this week. You might see something about Echo the Dolphin.
I know we already recorded that, but I heard in the news the other day that there were all like rumors swirling around about a potential remaster for that game.
Yeah, that's why I thought we could do that one.
Right, yeah, I wasn't sure if you like had heard that, because I had not until we'd already recorded it, and I was like, oh wait, that's great timing if Karl didn't know.
Echo the Dolphin is sick, man. It's just like the dolphin time travel alien fighting simulator. It's fantastic.
That like nobody knew was any of that because they couldn't get past the first fucking puzzle in the game.
Nobody did. On August 27th, Nintendo releases Super Mario Kart, the first in the Mario Kart series. Possibly one of the most successful games of all time, right?
One of the most successful video game series of all time, and that's just classing Mario Kart as its own thing, not Mario Sports or Mario in general, just Mario Kart. But like Mario Kart, like Super Mario Kart and Mario Kart Super Circuit, I think was the advanced one.
I've got the original though.
They're not great games.
But in the break though, I can go get it because I've got the original Super Mario Kart in the other room. So I'll bring those through for like show and tell, I suppose. I own this game. I own a game as old as you, Lucas.
Yeah, I own...
As I feel.
I own a couple of Master System games I assume are a little bit older than me, but like, I inherited them from my dad kind of thing of like, not that he died, just he didn't want to keep them in his house and just let me take them.
just went, son, I've got children now. When you get children, you also pass this. And you went, no, I'm keeping my video games.
But yeah, like that Super Mario Kart obviously kicked off the franchise, but isn't a very good game.
No.
I've gone back and like completed it on a virtual console and stuff, and the Nintendo Switch Online. I've played through it a couple of times. They don't play great. Same with the Game Boy Advance one. Like those 2D Mario Karts, like very good ideas and like incredibly groundbreaking for the time on Super Nintendo, but
it's just horribly uncompetitive because like the rubber banding has never been more obvious in that. Although it is super hype. The first time you get the feather and you jump across, you feel like such a badass when you do a jump across like an entire section of the map.
Oh yeah, the feather was one of those items where it's like they took the longest amount of time to give you any item that you could jump again, and it like I think they only
broke the game.
They only gave it to us once again. I think it was Mario Kart 7 maybe, or maybe it was the 8 battle mode or something. I can't quite remember, but
it broke the game because you could use it to jump out of bounds. Yeah, and it's like we can't have that in a more modern game. But we move on, Lucas, to October, December. And October was a dark month for gaming because in October we had, within the space of a week, a double whammy that literally almost killed video gaming. And that was the release of Mortal Kombat on October 8th, followed 7 days later by the release of Night Trap. And we've talked about this story a few times before, though, Lucas, but that's to just edify the audience now about why those two games specifically almost killed video games.
Yeah, to keep a long story short that we've already covered, like literally, I think we did an episode on Night Trap. So
on Night Trap, yeah.
You can go and hunt that down if you want the full story, but essentially just one of those was very, very violent, and one of those was maybe Night Trap was like exaggerated as being way more violent than it was, but because it was like FMV and it was actual actors being filmed getting like, you know, kidnapped and stuff, like admittedly by weird like fucking bin bag monsters with you know, shit effects and stuff. It really wasn't that bad, but you know, they took one scene out of context to make it look way worse than it actually was. But that all led to the ratings of like the like ESRB being basically born because they were trying to just ban video games and they had to self-regulate and actually start making age ratings and stuff so that, hey, like this is a better thing than like all of America trying to ban video games outright.
Yeah. And in regards to Mortal Kombat, the violence in it was undeniable. It was the draw. It's part of the appeal. It remains so to this day. But with Night Trap, it was more B-movie inspired. So the basic plot of Night Trap is you play a guy, a random unnamed person who controls a series of traps inside of a house, which doesn't look very futuristic, but has all sorts of weird futuristic bullshit in there. Mm-hmm. And you have to rescue, basically, you prevent a typical B-movie, crappy slasher movie by dropping bin bag vampires into like holes in the floor. And you play as the person trying to protect your like typical like, it's released in the 90s, but it's very 80s code of like your 80s babes. With like
a house full of like sleepover girls, but it's actually like clearly women in like nightgowns and stuff, but it's like they're all basically being threatened by these bin bag vampires, and if you don't activate traps in the house at the perfect moment, they start getting like captured and killed and stuff.
And it's for the most part very campy. But there's like, as you said, there's one moment that got taken out of context, and it is just a moment it's a game state fail. So if you do this, you lose the game. But in it, a lady gets grabbed by 5 bin bag vampires. But in that scene, out of context, they look like men in balaclava. So it looks very, and it's a woman screaming like a fucking lungs out. Like fair play to the actress.
An absolutely harrowing scream, and probably the best and most harrowing acting in the entire game.
Which is full of just really over-the-top, bad, campy B-movie action, but for one moment it suddenly turned into an actual horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
And they took that out of context and played it in the US Congress. And it's like, this is a murder simulator, because presumably they got the idea of Mortal Kombat and that game conflated and thought the violence of Mortal Kombat was in that. And yeah, nearly killed video games, because it's really hard to deny that that's not a thing a kid should have control over, where you have a woman screaming literal bloody murder.
And that's the thing, is these games were being sold to and marketed to children, even though, yeah, they shouldn't have been. No. Which, fair enough, ratings should exist for media, and I'm glad that the ESRB and all the other, you know, ratings across different parts of the globe and stuff were, like, brought into video games, because, yes, there are things like you shouldn't be selling Grand Theft Auto to children, even though I know that people give their kids Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
But, like, yeah, things like Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto shouldn't be played by 6-year-old children.
No, and it's one of those, like, what ifs of video games, of what if those games had not released so close to one another? What if a third game had been released that was violent enough so it's can get portrayed as a trend?
Could have tipped the scales the other way, right? Yeah.
Yeah. What if that lady had been a shit actress and they didn't have that scene to pull from? They only had Mortal Kombat.
What if Mortal Kombat looked more realistic? If it was possible for, like, the first Mortal Kombat game to look more realistic than it did. Bear in mind, Mortal Kombat looked way more realistic than most video games at the time, because
the draw was it used digitized actors, and I think that's the double whammy of that. What about if Mortal Kombat had used sprites like Street Fighter instead of trying to differentiate itself with?
There were plenty of games like that around the time that were heavily violent but were sprite based, so no one gave a shit, right?
Yeah, well, Street Fighter, right?
But Street Fighter, you're not ripping people's, like, skeletons out and stuff.
You are beating them half to death, though. Like,
there's a bit of blood, but it's not the same level as Mortal Kombat.
It's not the same level, but it is violence, right? And I mentioned a bunch of other video games released where it's like you play as policeman. There's a Die Hard game when you're shooting terrorists and stuff. The thing is, when you're shooting people, it's just something about seeing an actual digitized facsimile of a human being being violently torn apart. And in the case of Night Trap, being attacked.
Yeah, like, this was the moment in video games where a digitized sprite of, you know, all these different actors was like, oh my god, they've got real people in this fighting game.
Yeah.
And obviously we look back now and chuckle at that idea, but that's how people reacted to seeing Mortal Kombat for the first time in FMV video games. It was like, holy crap, we can like, screw sprite-based graphics. We can interact with real videos that are filmed of real actors.
I want them to bring those back. Bring FMV games back. I
had a struggle learning how Night Trap worked, but when they re-released it for Switch in HD, they actually, like, had remastered all of the original assets and stuff. I had a real struggle figuring out what the hell was going on for a while, but when I actually figured out how to start activating traps and not insta-losing the game, I had a blast with that Night Trap.
It's the video game equivalent. Remember those Goosebumps books where it's the Choose Your Own Adventure ones?
Mm-hmm.
It was like those. I used to love those. And it's a shame, like, you know, Night Trap basically killed any chance of that genre. It killed an entire genre. If it didn't kill video games, it killed that genre.
100%. I picked up Night Trap remastered on Switch for, like, a $5 on sale at one point. And definitely pick it up and give it a shot, because it's crazy and just actually an interesting game to play. But I will warn people that I spent the first hour of streaming it, like, basically insta-losing over and over again, being, what am I doing? What buttons am I meant to press? What is going on?
It's hard. But then you have to think to yourself, this came out in the same year as Super Mario Kart.
And also, if you were able to beat that game within the first couple of tries and it wasn't bastard hard, that would have lasted you about 90 minutes, and that was a full-price video game.
So you could probably get away with it was like a movie, right? Like, so $5 was probably a good amount to pay for something like that in the modern day, right? It's like you're basically paying for an episode of a TV show that you control.
Yeah.
But Lucas, that's the end of the year there, because there's nothing really released.
Wait, does it not have Link to the Past listed? I thought Link to the Past was 1992.
I could double check for you. I'm presuming. Maybe I just missed it.
Maybe it's 94 and I'm misremembering.
It was voted the game of the year, but it wasn't released that year.
Japan is 1991, North America and Europe 1992. So
there we go.
Probably why it's not listed.
It's only it'll reference like the first time it was released, which was Japan. Even though it was released in America that year, that wasn't the debut.
But us, that was a 92 game, and, like, you know, I always remember it as a 92 game, and that was the game that made Zelda Zelda.
It was, yes, but it's not listed on here, although it is like noted as being many publications game of that year.
And
It's
many
normally those things like a 6
people's
months, 9 months behind.
game of the decade, generation, and still some people's game of all time.
Like Zelda Link to the Past.
Zelda Link to the Past, if you ask a lot of, especially like Zelda fans that might be, you know, my age or around my age or a bit older or something, people still to this day argue that Link to the Past, or a lot of people argue Link to the Past is the best Zelda game, and I don't think it is, but I sit there and go, this video game was exceptionally good for the time, and I prefer playing the 3D games. That's just more my style. That's my first Zelda game was Ocarina of Time. I'm going to have more nostalgia for that as well. My favorite two are like the Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, like the two most recent 3D games. But Link to the Past changed like that series in the sense of it was the first one to actually nail down that Zelda formula, and
a formula it has had for over 30 years now.
Yeah, and obviously people, even when they changed up the formula with Breath of the Wild, people are, I want traditional Zelda back. Like, there are so many people that still yearn for that exact game design that they made with Link to the Past.
A game they've been playing for 30 years. But we do have some other notable things that happened that year, Lucas, of hardware releases. And speaking of Zelda, Sega released oh no, not Sega. Where is it? No, Philips releases the CDI. So speaking of Zelda, the CDI was released in 1992. And here's the thing as well, I feel bad for Philips, because you know what else happened that year? The European launch of the SNES.
Yeah, it did, yeah. And, man, the least said about the Philips CDI, the better, I guess. What a just non-starter, right?
It's one of the things where I imagine you'd want to own it for the sake of owning it.
I do, at some point, want to, like, own those games, like the non-Zelda Zelda games that are on the CDI and a CDI, but, like, more for display purposes and to laugh at it than anything else.
Yes, and speaking of display purposes, the only other thing of note released that year, at least for myself, is the Nintendo Super Scope, which I also own.
And Super Scope is great. I do want to say, though, shout out to the Philips CDI for burning the bridge between Sony and Nintendo to create the PlayStation.
PlayStation, yeah. So even though the CDI itself wasn't great, it's still a pretty monumental year for gaming in terms of the number of what-ifs.
Yeah, because if people don't know, like, Nintendo and Sony were originally working on a CD add-on for the Super Nintendo that even had, like, you know, the idea of, like, a PlayStation kind of, like, there's prototypes out there of, like, I can't remember whether it was called a Nintendo PlayStation or not, but either way, they had ideas of, like, Sony collaborating with Nintendo to make a CD add-on, and then Nintendo basically stabbed PlayStation in the back and went for a cheaper deal with Philips, and Sony were like, well, we've put all this effort in and we've got a good idea, so the PlayStation was then born.
Making our own shit. Let's go. I think an interesting year of what-ifs, and the only other thing I've seen on there that's noteworthy is that I think it sums up how big Street Fighter was, because if you go to the highest grossing arcade games in Japan, you had Street Fighter 2 The World Warrior and Street Fighter Dash Champion Edition as number 1 and 2, respectively. Like, two different versions of Street Fighter were the highest grossing arcade games in Japan.
What is Street Fighter Dash, then?
Street Fighter Champion Edition, but it's called Dash in Japan.
Oh, so is that the Champion Edition of 2, or is that the Champion Edition of the
Champion
first
Edition
one?
of 2.
Oh, of 2, okay. I'm going to say, because the first one wasn't very popular, it was only really 2 that, like...
Two solidified the format, similar to A Link to the Past. And Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition was released later that year.
And it is kind of crazy to think, like, obviously... I was going to say there's kind of 3 franchises where that happened, with, like, Super Mario as well, but I think maybe, like, Super Mario Bros. 3 is probably the one that really nailed the formula for Mario, and then World kind of perfected it, right?
Yeah. But the original Mario Bros is still fantastic.
It is, but then there was that weird point back in the NES where, like, Mario 2 was a different game than Mario 1 ever was. Zelda 2 was a very different game than Zelda 1 was. Like, Castlevania was all over the place at the time. Like, it was the style to make the sequel a completely different thing.
Yeah,
unless you're Mega Man, and they just went, fuck it, keep making Mega Man.
Same game, baby. Same game. But yeah, that's 1992 in gaming.
Mm-hmm.
Everything mentioned in that Wikipedia page is as old or slightly older than Lucas.
And they just, if you kind of just put that last 45 minutes worth of video games together as just the best games from 1992, 1992 is still considered one of the greatest years in video games.
It's up there. It's usually 1992 or 98, right? It's held up because 98 is when you had like Final Fantasy 7 and Metal Gear Solid coming out.
A lot of people also count if there's a few other years that people would mention of like 2007, 2010, but I think the most popular two picks I hear nowadays are 98 or 07.
And just, you know what it is? It's just we were eating good.
Yeah.
Why does it have to be competing with the years? Why can't it just be a year that we got real good?
I think that's what 92 is remembered as, of just like, we got the fucking Super Nintendo. The Nintendo, but it's Super now.
Yeah, Super Nintendo. Like, bring it back. Naming convention. I want the Super Switch. I want to call in the Switch 2 the Super Switch. Fuck you.
100% agree with Nintendo that the right move to make was just slap a big 2 on there so we don't get a fucking Wii U situation.
But still,
I am sad that it's not named something more fun like a Super Nintendo
Mega Switch. But it's either way, hell yeah. That's mine.
A damn good year. I'm happy to have been born in 92 in the sense of both, you know, not specifically necessarily that year, just that kind of general age of, you know, just kind of being on the cusp of video games really getting like the kind of, as we say, the templates nailed down, and
yeah, you were
gaming really solidifying itself and understanding what it needs to be, and the internet just coming into fruition properly. And I think we were just on that right timing of like that tech boom, right?
We're old enough to remember a time before computers, learn to use computers as they became the de facto way we interact with the world. But we're not young enough where it's the only way we know to interact with the world, so our attention spans are fucked.
And also, you know, I would say that I'm not limiting this to like early 90s. Obviously, that applies to people like late 80s, mid 90s and stuff. Yep. There's that just maybe like 10-year period where I think like
it's if you grew up with a computer,
that's a really lucky time.
Your formative years were spent learning how to use the nascent technology of computing, which means that it's now the foundation of the foundation of your childhood isn't interacting with them, so you still remember a time before they were the norm. So you still know how to do stuff like talk.
And I always assumed, oh, well, it's going to continue for other generations, but I think Gen Z, for example, they grew up in a generation where you don't need to understand the technology, you just need to know how to press an app. Because the technology does the work for you. You don't need to understand it anymore.
Yeah, we're the first and only generation who know how to use the computer. Because the previous generation don't, and the next generation don't either. Because it's the amount of times I hear from a friend of mine as a teacher about the thing that infuriates them is whenever he goes onto the computers at the end of a session, all of like the desktops are just with like 40 different files and pictures because they don't know how to save to a specific place on the computer. They just click to save and download to the desktop.
And it's going to be crazy. Like, genuinely, I say this in a slightly half jokey but half serious way. Obviously, a big speculation point for the Switch 2 now that it's been revealed but isn't out yet is, are these Joy-Cons going to be able to act like mice on a mouse pad?
Imagine having 2 mice.
But imagine how many kids are genuinely going to be like, what is this device?
Oh, yeah, because it's touchpad. It's my ex, who was a teacher, told me about when one of the most, like, not depressing, but it really surprised her. She handed kids a notebook, and they were pressing it. like an iPad.
Again, it's culture shock and it's sad to hear, but I don't blame those kids. That's
of course,
just
right.
Why would they know any different?
They had a screen put in front of their face since they were like 2 years old, and we didn't. And the screens that we did have, we always like limited access to them either by just nature of the way we grew up, or just the fact they were very, very prohibitively expensive to access and own.
And for the longest time, we learnt to not trust touchscreens because they were like those shitty ones where they would barely work.
They
you
still
had to
don't
like
work.
jab at these like machines in retail stores that would barely recognize you pressing the touchscreens. Like, please, I want to type my details in. I still remember the fights that I used to have with touchscreens back in the day.
Nightmarish. Don't stop putting them in cars.
Yeah, stop trying to like make your cars be able to fucking play Cyberpunk, please. Please. We don't need that. It's not a thing. And they constantly talk about how both PlayStation or Sony and Nintendo have worked with like cars before to make like cool exclusive cars, and like, oh man, they should just put like a Switch built into the car. No. They do not want the news article of person drives into like the middle of traffic because they were busy playing their built-in Nintendo Switch in their car.
Although I do laugh whenever I see that meme of it's like the person driving the car with like the really like tensed arm and just like Palatro in front of their face. And it's just like a bunch of kids on the road and it's like, woo! That does crap me up.
Oh god. Like, how many kids do you need to hit before you get a royal flush?
We don't know. Too many.
Dear oh dear, but that is probably a good point for us to take a quick break.
It is indeed, yes. We'll be back momentarily.
Will indeed. So let me just get like our up on the big screen. And then Carl, you can take a break whenever, and I'll just get some like echo of the music.
Okay, I'm gonna go grab myself.
I'll go get some background music, Paul.
I'm just gonna go get the stuff for show and tell. So I'll be back in 2-3 minutes.
Yeah, we'll just be a few minutes. I'll play some music. Well, then we are back. So thank you everyone for putting up with us for just taking a break there. Oh, so I guess this can be like both housekeeping and show and tell hour for us. Moment.
I've returned. I've returned with something that's apparently as old as you are, Lucas.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Just the Nintendo Super Scope. How's it feel? How's it make you feel it's as old as you are?
That's wild, isn't it? And look how cool that thing is.
We need them back. Best bit is as well, how's this for forward thinking? You could change the scope depending on if you're left or right-handed.
Oh.
Like modern fucking guns sometimes don't have this option. Instead of Super Scope though, left or right-handed, baby, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I fucked it up.
God.
Oh no, I took it off too much. You tell me about yours now.
While Carl does that, I will just say as well, just a little bit of housekeeping in the sense of like, just make sure you remember that you can help support the channel for free by like just liking and commenting and sharing, especially liking right now for all those folks watching live, so that it can help spread the joy and let other people know that we're live. It just for some reason like makes it a lot easier to find us while we're live if people like it while they're watching. So it'd be much.
I also realised it was on the wrong way around. There we go.
There we go.
Carl shooting the face, my big plastic gun. As old as you are, mate.
Did you bring the thing that you intended to bring, Carl?
Yeah, I've got Super Mario Kart.
You promised us somewhere.
Yeah, Super Mario Kart. There is. So that's also as old as Lucas is.
Yeah, and I brought some show and tell as well.
Okay, let's have a look.
Like obviously we mentioned a couple of games. I've got like little things that I'm trying not to get caught in the like just the auto green screen on Discord, but we got
disappears into the ether.
Ocarina of Time there. Got like the better Mario Kart 64 right there. Yeah. Like you can tell this is like my childhood copy where it's all like beaten and battered a little bit. Then another N64 game. You know, I played to death Pokemon Stadium 2, like the nice, what is meant to be like gold and silver cartridge, but it's like it looks like it's gold and then grey.
Golden, just
because like
steel.
Nintendo carts were grey, so it kind of just looks like
Bronze.
basically the same color on the back. I always like
it's fine though, right?
But as a kid, I was like, why is only the front half gold and the back half just regular? But then something I picked up like while I was over in Japan that I do appreciate is something that's even older than both of us, Carl. In very good condition, of course, because it's from Japan. And that's the original Super Mario Bros. Right there.
That's
like
not bad.
Famicom Super Mario Bros.
So I've got one thing. I'm not sure how old this is, but it is somewhat rare, and it is.
Oh, the Super Game Boy.
So how old were you when you realised? So the Super Game Boy was an attachment for the SNES, which you could put into your SNES and it would play Game Boy games. So it's like the start. Basically, it's the first backwards compatibility attachment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And basically, they couldn't figure out a way to get this to work. So what they did is they put all the hardware for a Game Boy inside of this.
Yeah, there is a Game Boy in there, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a Game Boy.
Like, obviously not the screen and the buttons and stuff, but the actual, like, hard, like, chip for the Game Boy. There's just a full Game Boy chip inside, yeah.
Inside that, yeah. And it can play Game Boy games. And yes, it still works. Nice. I periodically get all of my consoles out once a year, just to make sure like they're still working and they're still functioning. And more recently, I played like Final Fantasy X-2 on my PS2.
Well, Carl, I also have something that wouldn't work on you know, the Super Game Boy. They would work on a different type of Game Boy player, though.
Which is?
And that is, like, my topic for this week, because you mentioned earlier you were talking about some, like, value of old games, and we kind of had that discussion on our friend group chat.
We did, yes.
And I decided that I would talk about these bad boys right here.
Cheers.
Like the Generation 3 of Pokemon.
Which is Pokemon Ruby, Pokemon Sapphire, and Pokemon Emerald, yes?
That is as long
Lucas, you're holding about 150 quid, 200 quid in your hands there.
Yeah, right? Even without the boxes and manuals and stuff, right?
So presumably this is inspired by, recently a friend of mine came over, so all of this stuff is on display in my house.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you know what? I own it. I like it. It's a big part of my personality, my childhood. So just what I think, like I play games pretty much every day. It's like it's the way I choose to relax. Let's put them on display in my house. And a friend walked over and he saw that I've got Pokemon Ruby version, Metroid Zero Mission, and Final Fantasy II Dawn of Souls. I went, you know, you got like 100 quid sat there, right? I went, what? I went, yeah. I went, no, because that's just in the box. I went, no. The cartridges alone are worth 50 quid round. I went, no.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, yeah, Pokemon Ruby cost 50 quid.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't want to do if I'm ever add up. eBay, baby.
That's the thing is, like, you know, you're at a point in your life where you're comfortable enough where you're not going to be like, oh shit, I guess I'll sell that game for 50 quid, right?
It's really funny though, because like me just having that on a shelf next to like all these other games is actually quite a flex, because it's the equivalent of having out like a really expensive piece of like art, right? Not really, like,
not really expensive, but yeah.
But at the same time, having just something worth several £100s just sat there for its aesthetic value.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a pretty baller move.
Yeah.
It's like the Nintendo Super Scope, right? It still works. I've got all the attachments and stuff for it, but I'm never going to use it. That's how it's a flex.
And we are talking about Generation 3, and I remembered just having a look for like, oh, what Gen 3 Pokemon games have I got? Two of them.
Got all.
Well, no, two of the, because Generation 3, bear in mind, like, we're talking about all of Gen 3. We're not talking about just Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. We're talking about the third generation of Pokemon. So that also includes Pokemon Fire Red, Pokemon Leaf Green, or remakes.
They're worth way more,
Red
right?
and Blue.
They're the ones that are worth the big bucks.
I don't know, because when I was having a quick look, when you mentioned that, the top value one I could find was Pokemon Emerald in a box, and then after that, we had Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, and then
of course it's Emerald,
followed by Pokemon Colosseum.
Because generally, when they do the dual, like they do Ruby Sapphire, Emerald was probably released in lesser quantities, so it's rarer just by
And
by
then
virtue of
same
that, right?
with like Pokemon Colosseum. That's the one that came first, but XD Gale of Darkness wasn't as popular, therefore it's rarer, therefore it's more expensive. And they are all encompassed within the third generation of Pokemon. And just
pretty stacked generation, all things considered, right? There's some beefy games in that gen.
There's games in there.
Well, Ruby Sapphire, I can send
Ruby Sapphire and Emerald are great.
Leaf Red, Fire Red, Leaf Green, you don't like those? Those are pretty faithful remakes from what I remember.
I think they're alright.
Okay, I like them.
I really like them. I don't think anything that they added was like substantial, but I do think that it's nice to be able to play those original games in like, you know, an updated way. I don't really think that they did much to the games to like make them better. I think the Sevi Isles are bad. So yeah, I think like they improved it in the sense of like they updated it to like Gen 3 times, but realistically I don't think they made the games better.
But just a new lick of paint.
Yeah, exactly. And then Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness are not good. Maybe arguably bad as Pokemon games.
Well, they're worth lots of money, so it means they're good, right?
Yeah, like they're worth lots of money because no fucker wanted to buy.
That's how it works, right? It's still annoying that like the best version of Metal Gear Solid is a lot behind like a £200 price tag.
Because
Twin Snakes
or game Twin Snakes, right? Yeah,
it's worth like £200. It's impossible to get your hands on. I will never own that game.
And it's like Pokemon Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness were games that Game Freak didn't seem to want to be made. They were developed by people that had never worked on Pokemon before. They presumably just took a load of development away from Gen 3 of like the real games so that they could explain to these like previously Dragon Quest developers how the fuck to make a Pokemon. And like there weren't...
They should try to do that for the new Pokemon games. Have tell about make a Pokemon game.
What's the tagline for Pokemon over in Europe and America, Carl?
I believe it is "Fuck you, buy it."
Well, that is for Gen 3, I'll tell you that much. But, you know, obviously we grew up with Gotta Catch 'em All Pokemon. Or Pokemon! And it's like, Pokemon Colosseum, you can catch 48 Pokemon, Carl.
That's a lot of Pokemon.
There was like 300 at the time.
Lucas, shut up.
Pokemon XD
you
Gale of
sit there with your
Darkness.
48 Pokemon and you'll be happy.
Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness added some amount of
the dark
wild
Pokemon,
battles.
Right? People wanted the shadow ones.
But no one wanted the shadow Pokemon. You caught the shadow Pokemon so you could purify them into regular Pokemon. But they were the only Pokemon you could get in the fucking game. And then XD Gale of Darkness added a small amount of wild Pokemon you could also catch in your adventure. But bear in mind, Generation 3 was the first exit, Carl.
It was, but no one cared because no one bought that game, apparently.
Well, no, I mean, like, the whole generation was the first exit.
I guess
the big controversy around Pokemon, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald at the time, was that not all of the Pokemon from all of the previous games would be in the games.
But to make up for that, there was like 150 new ones, right?
So, yeah, I wonder how many Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire added. So we have our wiki page here. The addition of 135 new Pokemon.
That's a decent amount of new Pokemon.
It is, which Generation 2 only added 100 Pokemon, and it brought up the brand new total to 386.
How much does it piss you off that it's not a round number? Every time they update it. It's like Pokemon's never been a round number because it started at 151. But 151 has a nice ring to it, 151.
And also it started out as 150 with a secret Pokemon.
Yeah. It's just, how annoying is it that it's never been a round number?
Mm-hmm.
Every new game, it's like, because it makes it so difficult to know the exact amount.
Yeah. It's like, I believe there's 1,019 individual Pokemon nowadays. Then there's extra forms and stuff, and like Mega Evolutions and things like that. But yeah, like back when Sword and Shield came out, there was a big hubbub because people were like, hey, this is going to be like a game where I can't bring all of my Pokemon from previous games into Sword and Shield. And that was all the way back on the Game Boy Advance for Generation 3 because Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald didn't have every Pokemon in them. And that was pretty standard. I don't think Generation 2 had every Pokemon available, but you could trade up from Generation 1 if not.
And it was Emerald that added the National Dex, right?
I can't remember. I think they all had a National Dex in them.
Well, so you could technically get every Pokemon, just not in the game.
Yeah, so
that's how they normally handled it, right?
That's the difference, is that Sword and Shield, even if you could trade them from a different game or from Pokemon Home or whatever, some Pokemon never had the capability to exist in those games, same with Scarlet and Violet. The difference with Gen 3 is that Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald had the capability to like render every single Pokemon if they were traded in, but Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald didn't have the capabilities for you to get the Pokemon in those games. You had to go and buy Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, you had to go buy Pokemon Colosseum, and you had to go buy Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. And you had to be able to trade with Game Boy Advances and link cables and GameCubes to be able to bring all of the entire National Dex into your Pokemon Emerald, say.
And you know what I'm going to say? Something controversial here. I'm okay with that because when I grew up and when I was playing this game, I was like 12 and I didn't care about catching them all. I just thought it was cool that I could. And also, the amount of steps to get the Pokemon wasn't as much as like later gens where you had to like trade between like 4 different generations of like games.
But I will say that the gimmick of like, fuck you, buy a GameCube, buy like a, you know, XYZ, not Pokemon XYZ.
That's what at the time though. That's not what I thought. When I was a kid, I wasn't thinking, "Oh no, I need to buy a GameCube." It's like, "Oh, if I have a GameCube, I know someone has one. Ooh, they can trade a Pokemon with me."
Well, that's certainly not how I saw it as a kid because I was a kid who wanted to catch them all.
Ah, okay.
So I had a GameCube, but I was annoyed that I had to go buy a link cable to go trade all my Pokemon. I was annoyed that I had to constantly trade them back and forth in a very slow process and stuff. So to me, it was annoying, and I already owned a GameCube and owned Pokemon Colosseum and XD because I just wanted to buy every Pokemon game out there. So I can imagine that it's way more frustrating to be a Pokemon fan who was like me, but in a situation where you didn't want to have bought Pokemon Colosseum, but you were forced to get those Pokemon.
I'm so glad that I was. Like, for me, I was just like, ooh, I like Shedinja. That's cool.
See, I was one of those Pokemon players, and I still am to this day, right?
You've got a living Dex, haven't you? Like every Pokemon.
I'm one Pokemon away from having a living Dex.
What do you need? Go on, let us know in the podcast. Maybe someone's got it out there.
I need that stupid mythical monkey thing.
Zarude. Zarude's the Sandstorm Pokemon.
Yeah, I still need a Zarude. That is the only Pokemon that I need before I've got a living Dex of every normal Pokemon, and I also want like a living Dex of all the alternate forms of every single Pokemon. Like I've got every Vivian form you can get and stuff like that.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to shout out on the podcast and you've got one of those Pokemon you're willing to trade to Lucas, let him know.
Fucking Zarude. It's like been given away one time in a mystery gift event when I wasn't playing Pokemon and paying attention to the news.
There we go. Go to our Discord, let Lucas know you get a shout out on the podcast. I'm going to make an executive decision. I think you'll give someone a shout out for a living Dex, right?
Oh, of course I will, yeah. And, you know, there's already somebody over in my like Legend of Kanto Discord, which is like my Twitch Discord.
It's the Discord he goes to.
I've already had someone help me out with a couple of Pokemon like Hooper and Volcanion. But yeah, like that Zarude is like the one where basically like everyone, you know, that I've spoken to has been like, look, I don't give a shit about that Pokemon, I'd totally give it to you, but I also wasn't giving a shit about Pokemon then, because they gave it away in, like, the 3rd year of Pokemon Sword and Shield, where no one was really playing it and paying attention to the news and stuff anymore, and
And how much does it annoy you that it's just a shit Pokemon that you don't like?
It's just a shit mythical Pokemon that's given away in one mystery gift that I will never want to use ever.
And it's not even got any competitive viability. It doesn't look interesting.
No.
It has no lore behind it. It had a movie probably because every fucking mythical Pokemon. There's like 800 Pokemon movies.
I think it might
even
have
Ash is like, I don't want that.
I think it might be one of the movies where Ash died and like Zaru brought it back to life.
But Ash dies in so many of those Pokemon movies.
Like, how many times has Ash died and been brought back by a legendary Pokemon? That's not even a fun gimmick unique to itself.
The gimmick they need to bring back is making my Pikachu talk.
That's what I was just thinking, yeah.
It's still one of the funniest reaction videos. It's like, people say the end game cinema reaction is like, no. It's that Pokemon movie where Pikachu talks and says, "I love you, Ash," and the entire crowd in unison goes, "What?"
And they did, I think it was the remake of Mewtwo Strikes Back, the first Pokemon movie. I think it was the remake 3D, of that where they did it in like the weird 3D CG model form, where
which looks terrible.
It looks terrible, and Ash's Pikachu legitimately like says that in a full English sentence, and everyone was like, "No, this is not okay."
He's so funny. I'm like, "I love you, Ash," and everyone in the audience did the same thing. Like, what? It's like, it's the opposite of a hype moment, right? It's like a moment where everyone's in unison. Like, did we all just have collective psychosis there?
Yeah, it's the jumping the shark of Pokemon, right? Where everyone just looked at each other and went, "No, this has gone too far."
Yeah. And so it's one of those moments I wish I could have been in the cinema for.
I for the longest time did not realise that the term jumping the shark was a very literal thing.
It's a real thing, yeah. Fonzie jumped the shark.
Yeah, like, if people don't know...
Happy Days.
Jumping the shark is a term where, like, generally it's used for a TV series originally, but just generally a piece of media. Jumping the shark means that they've, like, kind of gone too far. It's gotten bad. It's abandoned its initial, like, premise. It's just... It's
gotten
complete shadow of what it used to be. It's no longer what it was.
Yes, and it used to mean it's when like the original premise of the show is overtaken by just wild, absurd scenarios, but it more generally means just the show is no longer good. That's another term for a show no longer being good is like zombie. It's like zombie Simpsons is what people refer to as like modern Simpsons of just, it's just shambling along. There's no life left. There's no soul, but it's there. It kind of looks like it used to, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah, so for example, The Simpsons, a lot of people would argue the moment The Simpsons jumped the shark is, Karl.
It's Principal and the Pauper, where Principal Skinner is revealed to not be Principal Skinner. He is Armin Tanzarian, because it's such a wild departure from the earlier tone of the show that it doesn't feel like the same show anymore.
The guy just let his captain or whatever he was in the war like die, and then he took his entire persona and just went to Springfield and said, "Hi, Mom, remember me? I'm your son, Principal Skinner," and just took his life.
Yeah. It's like in the Fonzie case, it's like Fonzie literally gets on a water ski and jumps over sharks. And people were like, okay, Fonzie was cool, and he had like not superpowers, but he was always like, effortlessly cool and could do anything. Like he'd jump his motorcycle and he'd do cool tricks. But it's like when he jumped a shark on a water ski wearing his leather jacket, it's like, okay, fuck this.
Yeah, this has gone too far. What are we watching at this point? Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever had that? What's like a show or media franchise? Have you had that moment with one that you remember off the top of your head? So I said I had it with Final Fantasy 16. Not necessarily like the jumping the shark, but I got to the very end of the game, and it was literally the final cutscene before the final boss. I just went, I don't give a shit. I just don't care. I just turned the game off and uninstalled it. Because I was like, I don't care what any of these characters are saying. Everyone is boring. The world sucks. The gameplay's boring. It looks pretty, but fucking, what am I doing? I've just spent 20 hours and I don't care.
Yeah, I guess like I probably have. I did kind of abandon I think it was the very last season of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, because they went
that got bad.
so strange with the tone of the show, right?
They course corrected so hard to deal with all the criticism of the police that it just didn't become the same show.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what show handled this better? Because they actually cared.
Go on.
And it's a show that is because it was always doing that, is the show SWAT with Shamar Moore.
Right.
Which is based on an earlier show. It's a remake or reboot. Or maybe it's even a continuation of a show from the 80s called SWAT. And Shamar Moore is very socially conscious. And as a black man, he was very, very keen to have storylines directly addressing issues that the police have had in regards to their treatment of black Americans.
So he was constantly referring to stuff like that, yeah.
Yes. So when they had their pandemic episode, for example, when they're wearing masks, it doesn't feel like it's like a gimmick the show is using. Like they did it during Brooklyn Nine-Nine where they're all wearing masks and they joke about it. It's like, no, because them people making this really do give a shit and are using the premise of a police show as a vehicle to tell these stories that otherwise would perhaps not get told or would perhaps not reach the audience that they want to reach, which is people who watch police procedurals, which tend to skew older, white, and on the right of the political spectrum.
Yeah, so I think I did at some point go back and finish Brooklyn Nine-Nine because I was so close to finishing at that point, but
it's not the same show, is it?
I just watched that first couple of episodes where the episode where Jake and Rosa work together because Rosa's quit and become a PI, and it's oh no, police are actually the bad guys, but don't worry, I know one police captain who's definitely a good police captain. And then Jake goes to work with them, and then they betray Jake, and is no, we've got to make sure that all police are corrupt and the system stays the same. And it's, oh no, I guess all police are really bad.
The worst part is, it's when you have those moments, you don't feel like it's the characters talking. It feels like the actors talking.
Yes.
Trying to get ahead of the controversy they clearly did not have in mind, but was always in the background. While they were making the original show. So I said SWAT's really interesting. There's a really great episode actually where it's Hondo, Shamar Moore's character, gets pulled over by another cop, and he's so when you watch it, it's Hondo's gonna fucking read this guy the riot act. And he's just sat in his car looking cool as fuck. Guy comes over and he's what's going on. You know why this guy pulled him over, this racist ass white cop. But it's just really satisfying to see, because Shamar Moore's going to tell him what for, but he's in the car with someone else. And halfway through the thing, you go, oh, well, that's not son or friend. Well, why don't you flash your badge? It's shut up. So what? Just flash your badge and get it. It's no, I want to see how far this goes. And he waits right till the guy's about to write him a ticket. Just kind of see your wallet. It's bam! I'm a police officer. Oh, you're no, SWAT officer, motherfucker. And he goes, you should have told me you're a police officer. And Shamar Moore looks him dead in the eye and goes, why does that matter? And it's yeah, you tell him. But that's just a random moment in an episode. And they have loads of stuff like that. They have an entire arc about them outing a racist cop. And they get Hondo. And you think in a show that would be resolved, right? The cops will get fired. No, they don't. They say the cops get away with it. And it just never comes up again. And Hondo's well, I guess just the police are racist. I've just got to deal with that now.
And there is ways that they could have done it, because Brooklyn Nine-Nine, while it a lot of the time did talk about the other cops are definitely the heroes, right? But
oh yeah,
it did also have a lot of times where it dealt with difficult situations, the entire character of Captain Holt being a gay black captain. Naturally, that character confronts a lot of different problems with the police force and talks about it actively, but I think they refer more to a lot of problems as if they were in the past, right?
They always refer to it as the 80s, which is as if to say it's not as much of a problem now. And that's why it feels so hollow when they do address it.
And they always say oh well, it's not perfect, but things have gotten better. But then it feels like a real hard pivot where it just threw me off. And more people in the chat or in comments below watching after the fact, let us know what your least favorite or favorite moments of Jump in the Shark, because it might be one of those things of like someone likes a show when it jumped the shark and became something different.
Well, there's a couple that it's the term for that is growing the beard. And it's Star Trek TNG. Season 2 is kind of when you can tell season 1.
One of the characters like grows a beard between seasons, right? And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden that's the like real good start of next gen.
It's generally considered season 2 onwards is like where the good shit starts, and it's the behind the scenes. It's not because the guy grew a beard. It's because they stopped using holdover scripts from the 60s and started getting new scripts written in the 90s with people not born literally almost half a century ago.
Oh yeah, but more, I mean, the like a notable difference between the two seasons is that the guy has a beard.
It's visualized by that guy growing a beard, so the term is growing the beard.
And that's
shows like that.
Yeah, like I mean, I do really enjoy it from the beginning, but I think there's a noticeable jump in quality when Danny DeVito joins Always Sunny in season 2.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's like one that comes to mind straight away. But yeah, before I bring it back to Pokemon, one that I mentioned that like jumps the shark at the end of the show in the last 5 minutes is How I Met Your Mother, where it just abandons the entire premise of the mother in the last like 5 minutes of the show. And it's weird to say it jumps the shark in the last episode, but it kind of does.
It's probably only topped by 2.5 Men, where Charlie Sheen had his like breakdown, got written out of the show.
Yeah.
And behind the scenes, like Chuck Lorre, the producer, writer, director, was really pissed at Charlie Sheen. He was a huge knobhead to Charlie Sheen because he's like, you ruined my show. And it's like, well, Charlie Sheen basically had a mental breakdown in the public eye. Yeah, he acted like a bit of a prick, but he did come back to, and his pitch, Charlie Sheen's pitch for a final episode is, why don't we have my character come back and apologize for all the shit he did? And that'll be, but like, it's also me, because it's like, people associate with this character. And we'll use that, and then what we'll do is, the final episode will be everyone coming together and going forward as a family. And Chuck Lorre's like, no. I'm going to write your character to be a fucking prick, like by extension you, and I'm going to kill you by dropping a piano on your head twice. And he kills the character twice.
Oh my god.
Because he just didn't like Charlie Sheen.
And
it's weird.
I think Chat mentions Game of Thrones last season. It's hard to like pinpoint a moment of like a very specific one scene or like one moment in Game of Thrones, but that last season I'd say counts for sure.
I think the moment where you realise, oh god, this is just like a fucking schlock, is where the Greyjoy walks out of the water like the fucking Terminator. Like, even though that's like after a bunch of random wild bullshit happens, I think just when he walks out of the water like the fucking Terminator, the exact moment Jaime Lannister turns up, it's like they don't care about telling a story anymore. Yeah, this is just smashing action figures together.
That's the thing, is that entire season was very much like, oh, they are like rushing the shit out of this. Like, characters don't seem to be sticking to their character anymore, or
they teleport like, over the joint.
Everyone's teleporting everywhere. Like, there are no interstitials anymore. There is just, like, thing happening. And then, yeah, they all seem to just completely abandon all of their previous character arcs and, like, what you would imagine would be the correct decisions they make. Like, Danny burning all the people, right? Like, that is probably one of the most mainstream examples of recent times where just everyone watched that happen in real time near enough.
Yeah. And I know like a lot of people single out where it's Arya stabs the Night King, right?
But I think I was already seeing that, like, I was even watching season 5, turn around to Jenna going, it's moving really quickly and everyone seems to just appear in places. This feels really weird. Like, there were even elements of it in season 5.
Season 5 is generally seen as when it starts. That's when they stopped having stuff in the books to pull from, or they still had some. But I think like usually it's the stabbing of the Night King. But for me, it's just, even though it's way later in the season, it's like basically it's the last episode. It's just the moment where he walks out of the water, and I'm like, fuck this.
Like I would say,
but he walks out just as Jamie walks past. Like, you couldn't have just had him like lying there, next to the cave, like half dead, and then he sees Jamie gets but no, he has to walk out of the exact right cinematic moment.
Yeah, it's just wild to me that like that entire season was that to me, so I can't really pick a point. Like again, just it all blurs into one of bad decision after bad decision for me, but yeah, I just think all of season 6 to me was a jump the shark moment. But yeah, it's
fascinating.
But like a way to bring it
for another day.
Like, I was gonna say a way to bring it back to Generation 3 of Pokemon though, is that
yes,
just generally for me, I think Pokemon had a jumping the shark moment, and
the Brian Sharpedo.
No, it wasn't actually Generation 3 that I'm gonna refer to for the jumping the shark. I think the moment for me which really like not like jump the shark is a loose term, but is Pokemon Sword and Shield where Dynamax broke me.
This is just
these gimmicks are getting so bad that I can't just put them aside in my brain anymore. Where I didn't like Z moves, but Z moves was well, I guess sometimes when I'm playing online, someone's gonna nuke one Pokemon that I have.
Whereas Dynamax was integral. The entire game was built around the Dynamax. And it's actually part of the reason why.
Up to 6 turns of a battle were Dynamaxing.
It's also a fun fact, the reason why they didn't have as many models. Like, part of the reason why there wasn't as many Pokemon in that game is because they had to create all new models for each Pokemon to have a Dynamax model. And you might be thinking, don't you mean Gigantamax because they were different like designs? No,
even just the bigger Dynamax models, yeah.
Even though they created in the previous gen fully HD models, or the previous game, right? It was
Sun and Moon, they'd redone every single model for every Pokemon, yeah.
So in Sun and Moon, every single Pokemon had a brand new model that was future-proofed, and people have like extracted these models from the game and blown them up to be like 400 times their size, and they still look fantastic. They redesigned.
Like they even have like people have found footage of like, no, we didn't misremember this. They were saying during the development of Sun and Moon, like, look, we have future-proofed this. We have made these models way higher asset than they need to be for these games, so we can just keep reusing them in the future and make like development smoother.
But then for Sword and Shield, they redesigned every asset from scratch, and then for every Dynamax Pokemon, they had to create 3 separate new models because the cloud that floats above the Pokemon's head in Dynamax form is a separate model, and rather than figure out a way to remove one of the clouds each time a turn, because there's 3 clouds on the first turn, then 2, then 1, then it disappears when the Pokemon starts Dynamaxing. They created 3 entirely new models with that cloud for every Pokemon in the game. And that took up so much development time, they had to remove Pokemon from the game. Even though they already had high-quality, future-proof models that they had.
But they then couldn't use a generation after, and...
Literally the next day.
I love Mega Pokemon as a gimmick, and Pokemon has often relied on Pokemon battle gimmicks, arguably since every generation, right? Is like Pokemon Gen 2. Oh look, we've added held items. Generation 3, we've added double battles. Generation 4 was multi-battles and triple battles. Gen 5, maybe Gen 5 was triple battles or something.
Or there's a bunch though, right?
Yeah, and then it started out, then it became further than that of like, oh, now each one adds a new gimmick of like Mega Pokemon, Z-moves, Dynamax, Terrestrialization, and they went from, oh, this is like minor changes, like abilities as well in Gen 3, like, the minor things that are going to change the way we battle to, oh no, this is a gimmick that like changes the entire like
the entire match now revolves around this gimmick.
Just revolves around them. Yeah,
it's similar to like fighting games where Tekken. I like Tekken, but the newer one has the system of it's the heat system where by doing certain moves you're able to engage the heat system, which makes your character for about 20 seconds much more powerful. Which is very visually interesting and makes for really visually interesting matches. The problem is that Tekken is a game where characters have, in some cases, move lists 100 moves long. And not every move is useful, but they always were situational. But by only giving every character about 8 heat engagers and like 8 good moves in heat, and the fact that matches can last literally 10 seconds if you get a good start, means that you now have cut every character's move list to be about a quarter of what it is.
Right.
You'll only ever see a quarter because it's a good system. It's fun to watch, but it's like that's the Dynamax, right? Of you've got literally thousands, hundreds of thousands of ways this systems can interact, but it all boils down to who Dynamaxes first.
Yeah.
So you never get to see any of the interesting stuff.
And it all boils down to which Pokemon have the moves available to them that are ultimately like the best Dynamax moves. And normally it became then which Gigantamax Pokemon do you use because they get the unique moves, similar to like a lot of the Z moves. People would use the Pokemon that had unique Z moves because they would have special properties that were better than just regular ones. And
which means that even though technically every Pokemon in the game can have a use Z move, you're generally going to use the 20 or so that Game Freak are blessed with the special ones.
Same with
Dynamax, right?
Dynamax is you're usually going to just see fucking G-Max Charizard because they have the special G-Max Charizard Flare move or whatever it's called.
Which means that basically all the effort they put into creating a Dynamax model for like Mareep is basically wasted because you are literally never going to see that ever in gameplay.
Is the one argument I've seen where I turn around a little bit with terrestrialization of, well, at very least, apart from a couple of very like unique examples where they're not even actually used that much, terrestrialization can pretty much be used by any Pokemon on your team well.
Pretty much, yeah. It's a system that can be used.
It's not like Mega Pokemon or Gigantamax or Z moves where you basically have a short list of Pokemon to pick from. It's basically just, hey, this gimmick can actually be viably used by basically any Pokemon you want to in unique different ways. And like, yeah, obviously at the high level of competitive format, a lot of people use the same teams and same gimmicks and stuff, but
same with anything, right?
I have had, a team that I built where I'd go, well, each one of these has, in different scenarios, a chance to terrestrialize if needed. And that means that team building wise, it takes actually a bit more work to like go and grind out those Terra fucking shards to be able to, utilize those and stuff. But at least it's just, hey, this thing is actually not that powerful. It's used quite defensively and offensively, mixed in different ways, and you can use it on just like pretty much any Pokemon you want to try and use it with.
Yeah, so even though it looks stupid.
Yes, it does.
That's all I'll say, it looks stupid.
But like back to Gen 3, for example, like the gimmicks back then, as I say, were like Pokemon contests in the single player stuff, but
yes, bring them back.
They did for ORAS, right? And like I enjoyed the way that they did them in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire.
So fun. When you dress up like your Tyranitar, put in his little dress with his sunglasses, like, yeah!
I'm definitely a type of person that over the years has gotten less patient with stuff like that. But I remember when the like Sapphire Ruby came out, I was into doing Pokemon contests loads. I really enjoyed it.
I miss berry mixing. Yeah, I found berry mixing super satisfying.
Maybe 10. I can't remember.
It was in number 3 as well.
It was in number 3 as well, yeah. And then they had different ways of doing them from like 3, 4, 5, yeah. But
that's when they had secret bases as well. There's so many good gimmicks in that game.
Secret bases was a really good gimmick as well, and yeah.
Secret bases.
And then, as I say, they added both abilities and double battles to Pokemon in Gen 3, and that's where, to me, Pokemon really solidifies itself as a good RPG.
Yes.
I think abilities and double battles change up the battling in such ways
that
like it adds enough complexity to where I actually see the fun in team building and playing competitive battles and stuff at that point.
It's so weird that literally Pokemon, the standardized format for all competitive gameplay that they host and sponsor is double battles, and they don't have it in the games.
It's not in the first 2 generations of Pokemon, which makes it a bit weird. And it's also just basically rarely used throughout every single campaign. It's like,
how have they
really
not made
weird.
it a gimmick of a new game? Like the new game of like you pick 2 partner Pokemon.
They did in one sense in the DLC 2 for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is every single trainer had like actually competitive Pokemon and would fight you in double battles and use good items and have good IVs and movesets and stuff. So that was great because not only did they do that, they also level capped it at 70. So if you wanted to just power through with a bunch of level 100 Pokemon and not give a shit about competitive stuff, you could beat the DLC that way anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, yeah, it was just like, Gen 3 was a real game changer, and I think they needed to change it up that much because people might not remember and might not think of it that way, but Generation 3 was, if they got it wrong, maybe going to be the deathbed for Pokemon.
Or at the very least would have been a very, like I say, it's a moment in time where we could have had a very different future.
It was at a crossroads, yes.
Yeah, like it was the game that revitalized the brand.
Well, it wasn't really. It was the game that it was the game that kind of kept current Pokemon fans going and did it well. Gen 4 being on the DS and stuff like that.
I guess, yeah, because the DS was like, did gangbusters numbers. I think I'm in my own biases, like seep in here of just, for me, Ruby was like the last Pokemon game I remember playing as a kid and really enjoying.
That's definitely both that they massively improved the games and they were way better games as like RPGs are concerned. And the Gen 3 Pokemon are really good as well. So we had we had 386 Pokemon. All 3 generations of Pokemon so far, I think, had pretty solid designs overall. Every gen has shit Pokemon. Let's just face it, but like some of my favorite Pokemon are from like Gen 2 and 3 especially.
No, mate, you still got to pick up your Charger Bug. When are you going to pick your Charger Bug up?
Well, we'll meet up for our birthdays relatively soon, right?
We do. Oh, if we get to up tier on Patreon, where we could do like in-person recordings. All these little gifts I buy Lucas to try and win back his favor after we stop being friends.
But yeah, like I'd say Generation 3 in terms of the base 3 games, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, really like did massive amounts for the games as like people who were into Pokemon are concerned, but they did sell a lot less than Gen 2.
Yeah, well, in the end, they sold, because how can anything sell more than those original couple games, man?
Yeah, and like that's the thing is, Pokemania never really came back until Pokemon Go, but
Pokemon Go was weird, right?
Yeah.
So that was released at such a specific time. We even talked about one of the very earliest episodes of Wiki Weekends.
Well, it formed Wiki Weekends, right?
Yeah, Pokemon Go is the cause of Wiki Weekends. Maybe if we ever get popular enough to have like our own wiki page, we can drop that deep, deep lore.
Yeah, because it was on a Carl's Corner podcast episode where we just decided to talk about Pokemon Go, and then we just were like, well, we can talk about Pokemon Go, but let's just make sure we're getting our facts right. Let's bring up the wiki page while we're having the discussion. And yeah, Pokemon Go was the first officially unofficial episode of Wiki Weekends.
It was
a podcast
indeed,
within a podcast.
It's where the idea started. Although about 5 years ago now.
Something around there, yeah. Maybe a bit longer ago. I can't quite remember. It was either like, I think it might have been like 5.5 years ago. Maybe I think it was like summertime. So yeah, I think it might have been maybe like 5.5 years back.
Like, that's the one. Like saying, drop in that deep, deep Wiki Weekends lore.
I've got a feeling it was 2019, and I think around 2019 is when I like officially set up a company so that I could be paid by you as like a contractor and stuff. I think it was 2019.
Yeah, when we realised that, we're going to maintain this courteous professional relationship, but we're never going to see each other outside of it.
You really need to stop this, Carl.
Do you know what? I'm liking it. I'm liking this new lore of me and you are like business associates who fucking hate each other.
I did fire you last week, so
you did on camera as well. What a power move!
Like, don't worry, I've still got everyone's favorite host just waiting in the wings.
You go, no, fuck off, try to bring an egg in.
Eggs here.
Can you imagine if we did that? We imagine if we span off and try to do like I did Wiki and you did Weekends. How would we split it?
Oh, I don't know. Do we get every other letter?
It's like us when like Fact Fiend of like I was gonna spin it off like as information perverts.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, just like it's one of those things, right? Of like, I adore Gen 3 of Pokemon, but it is kind of the black sheep in terms of like sales figures and stuff. And Gen 4 is when like a new generation of kids got into Pokemon kind of thing, and everyone's either nostalgic for like Gen 4 or Gen 1, or probably like nowadays the next new one would probably be like Sword and Shield, right?
If like
a lot of
time is a flat circle.
In, like, what's the first Pokemon game on the Switch? When a lot of people got in on the Switch as their first like games console and stuff.
But time is a flat circle. It's the meme, isn't it? Like you an ancient gamer, and it's on there. It's like Halo 3, and it's like I played that. I played that in university.
Yeah,
I was already an adult who could drink by the time that game came out, and I'm an ancient gamer, the ancient crustiest gamer.
Yeah, definitely. Weird when you see those things of like, do you people remember these games? And it's like fucking 360 games. Like, get off the internet, you fucking child.
Admittedly, though, like, you know, the TikTok generation, their brains are melted. The fact they remember something from over 10 years ago is impressive. A Herculean feat of mental gymnastics.
It's true, and like you say that in a way that, you know, might like kind of demolish the younger generation, but.
Oh, I mean it intentionally.
I literally myself have noticed that like my attention span has gotten worse since getting onto things like TikTok.
Oh, it's awful. It's corrosive to the ability to concentrate. Like,
and I don't mean that in a way of like, you're an idiot if you watch TikTok, blah, blah, blah. I watch TikTok every day. I'm just saying I have noticed it, right?
It changes your brain chemistry. Like they did this experiment with Google. Like Google does this where it literally rewires people's brains where you no longer remember the information, you remember how to get the information. Like you don't, like your brain, instead of remembering what the information is, it remembers the series of steps you took to get to where the information is stored.
And if
elsewhere,
the step is 0.
Yeah. Like, and that's the
step of TikTok is I swiped.
Yeah.
That's how I found the next piece of information.
And it was for a while, it was kind of hopeful because there was like articles being written about, could this be the next step in human evolution? Because we're able to offload what would otherwise overload our brains, information. We can offload it onto a computer. We can store it effectively online on the cloud. How great is it going to be? Because now we can have all this information stored out there and allow us to concentrate on other things. It's like, nah, all it's done is just like we took all the other stuff out and kept putting it online, so there's nothing left.
Yeah, but it is an interesting discussion in the sense of like, well, is it a way to evolve our brain chemistry in a sense of why do we need to retain information that well anymore? Like, is that's an argument and discussion to be had, right? Is that, okay, is there any actual real need to have that much of an attention span or memory span? It's all right there in the palm of our hand forever.
But it won't be. That's the thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, if you want to get into like long-term real nihilistic talk, it technically won't be forever, but as far as the people that are currently alive today and as far as we're concerned, it will be.
It's also like really dire, like I said, of the stories that you hear with like teachers and stuff of like, you know, teachers been in the game for like 10, 15 years where they like, you can, like there are kids coming into class who are illiterate at like 8, 9 years old. And it's like, there's always a couple of kids who struggle with reading and like, but it is noticeable, like year on year, it gets worse, which is frightening to think of. That's not how it's supposed to go. Education's supposed to get better as access to resources and the standard of living raises. Like standard of living generally correlates with like literacy, and it's not for like the first time in like a long time.
And
I think ever in some parts of the world.
again, that's a different part of that conversation, right? Is because, well, why would I need to learn grammar? I've got things to do it for me. It's like spelling and grammar and reading are probably things that we should be learning, not just relying on technology to autocorrect for us.
It's also as well like critical thinking skills.
Yes.
It's one of my something that I absolutely detest is when there's smarmy arseholes. And I've seen adults do this and I've seen YouTubers do it of why don't schools teach us how to do our taxes? Instead of and all they do is teach us algebra instead of how to do our taxes. It's like, what do you think your fucking taxes are?
I mean, true, but I never got taught how to like work through the backwards like government UK website and all of the error codes that it comes up with when I'm trying to enter my fucking taxes this month.
But the thing is, though, the government has a comprehensive like series of
when I contacted them and said I have this error, they went, I don't know how to solve that. I'm sorry.
Well, there is like a bunch of tutorials that you can teach yourself that, but it fascinates me that there's why don't schools teach us these critical life skills? It's like they did. They gave you the groundwork and the critical thinking skills to apply it to new situations.
I agree with the principle of what you're saying. Actually having to fill out my taxes this month, I heavily disagree, because nothing has prepared me for the back-asswards way that they do it.
Well, I guess that's just not, that system's not evolved in years, and it is very ass backwards. Like the fact that I have to physically sign and send off a piece of paper when everything, like I bought my house, I sent the money for my deposit on my house via my phone.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Why do I have to physically sign a piece of paper and send it to the government to send them money I don't want to give them?
Mm-hmm. And then when they're like, well, we know how much tax you owe. We already have figured it out, but we want you to do a mass test. Figure it out yourself, and we'll tell you if you got it wrong when we send you a fine. It's like, but you know how much... If you know that I've got it wrong...
That's more a problem for Americans, though, because like, over here... Like,
I've had a fine for it before.
You got fined? I don't think I've ever been fined.
Yeah, I got fined because I made an error, sent off the wrong amount, and then by the time they told me I'd made an error and sent the wrong amount, it was now a late fee. And it's
How much was that?
I can't remember. A shit amount of money that I didn't have at the time. I remember that much. It was a few years ago, and that was when I was like, oh, I don't want to deal with this. Yeah. But anyway, enough about me complaining about taxes. Like, they can go fuck themselves.
I'm always a strong proponent of education, and I will not have people shit, because educators are the worst members of society, despite being one of the most critical parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate when you get adults smarmily talk about how, why don't they teach us this at school? It's like, for the most part, they did. They gave you the grounding to teach yourself.
If we had better systems in place in the government, I think I totally agree. Yeah. But the fact that the country's so backwards over here, I would say that, like, maybe as we approach adulthood, we could have, like, instead of, you know, those lessons about... Do you remember about sex ed that we've talked to you about? Like, we're going to tell you that smoking's bad again for the 7th time. It's like, maybe one of those lessons could have been, we're going to sit you down and, like, teach you how the GovUK website works.
But Joe, they do classes like that. They do them in college. I went to them.
I didn't know they existed.
Well, you could have asked. And that's the thing, what school should be teaching you. School should be teaching you, if you don't know, raise your hand and ask.
But again,
I did.
That's another thing.
I went to a class that taught me how to do that.
Where, like, the classic thing of, like, well, as an adult, I found out about all these careers that I didn't know fucking existed, because I never got told that they existed while I was... I always got sat down and got asked, what do you want to do with your life? It's like, well, I don't know. And then I've discovered many things in adulthood where I've gone, I would have gone down an education path to go do this or that if I'd known that they were fucking jobs.
That's another thing that school does as well. Like I said, it should instill upon you, or in you, a innate sense of curiosity. And there's only so much a school could do. So there's only so much they can do to cast the widest net possible, but they give you that solid grounding, that innate curiosity, and the ability to critically think about the things. Like, and
when I was in school making decisions about what my GCSEs were going to be, I probably knew like there was like 30 jobs in the world that existed, and it was just the basic shit of like doctor, lawyer, fucking retail worker, chef, blah blah blah. The basic shit you learn when you're like 10 years old, and no one really told me that anything else was out there. And then you decide in your entire like career path through GCSEs and college and uni and all that jazz, and now I don't have qualifications that I probably need if I wanted to go into those different routes.
That's the
and
thing.
It's frustrating to this day.
I don't have qualifications that are necessarily related to what I do, but I still contend that the grounding my university degree gave me of teaching me to write essays, teaching me to interact with people, teaching me to seek out information, teaching me to manage my own time.
I'm not saying that education gave me nothing, don't get me wrong, but like there are jobs where you should have like an example that I've seen a lot is like zoologist. Is like most people have only ever heard of zoologists when it's too late to get a qualification in zoology.
I don't think though, because like many kids want to be a vet when they grow up, which would naturally lead you towards that path of like when you're a kid, it's a vet, you just want to work with animals. As you grow older, you'd be like
But if I'd known there was like a path to go down to work with animals that didn't require being a doctor, you know what I mean? Yeah, maybe I'd have been more curious about that.
And that's like hopefully the thing that school teaches, to be curious about the world, to ask questions. And in an ideal world, school would also have enough resources to nurture that curiosity and notice when a child, for example, is interested in space and give them the one-to-one attention that a child needs. And also then you can argue like parents need to play an active role in there. It's like,
yeah, sure.
We don't live in an ideal society.
We don't. And like that thing is I'm frustrated about this hypothetical where like in a perfect world we would have more resources and stuff to be able to like spend more time with individuals and learn to cater to them and stuff. I understand that's not the reality we live with. We also live in a world where like our parents can't spend their entire time teaching us about every possibility. But yeah,
all they can do is just teach you to be curious, ask questions, and give you the solid grounding required to interact with the majority of the world and the basic level of skills needed to get your foot on the ladder of any of those pursuits or endeavors.
The one thing I will say is that at least school taught me enough math that I can understand how Pokemon works.
Yeah.
I can get into competitive Pokemon battling. And yeah, it's wild. And like, that's the thing. Another thing is that, say for example, like how are schools and parents meant to teach you about new technologies and new avenues of like, well, most people that got into programming off their own back, out of their own curiosity, because
exactly, yeah,
no one
they
knew
were curious
that
about something.
Programming was going to be like a job 40 years ago that was going to be as in demand as it is now.
Yeah, and it's just the thing people were curious about it. Same thing like YouTube, right? The amount of like early YouTubers who got big were just people who were curious about this nascent technology and just followed their nose when it came to, okay, this is a fun thing. They expressed themselves creatively and were rewarded handsomely for doing so.
I guess there isn't a good place to leave this conversation, but we've been going on for a while.
Just
so we should
shout out to teachers.
100% always shout out to teachers because they have one of the toughest jobs, get barely any recognition or pay, and most people just sit there and bitch about the fact that they get holidays when they don't think about all the extra work teachers put in each and every single day, including their time off, quote unquote. And every teacher I know, all of their holidays are spent prepping for when they're not on holidays.
And then just like you get adults who are salty about the fact they didn't grasp the opportunities presented to them with both hands. They're like, well, my teacher should have told me. It's like, they probably did and you didn't listen. So the whole thing about why don't they teach us like life skills? They did. It's called home economics. You didn't take it because you thought it was quote unquote gay. And I'm speaking generally to like the kind of assholes you get saying that. Like, school don't teach you life skills. Like, you've got home economics, which teaches you cooking and sewing.
I got so fucking salty when I found out that like my high school started offering home economics just as soon as I'd left. I was like, I would have totally taken that over fucking product design.
That's the classic, right? Like, weird guys online always go, school should teach you life skills. It did, and you called the people who taught them gay, and now you don't know how to now you don't know how to wash your own ass.
I'm also very jealous of all of the people, like, as I've mentioned before, like when I went to college in like a high school that is all girls, that, you know, allows some males into the college portion, and they all knew how to do like sewing and stuff because they all took textiles, and I was so annoyed. I was like, I went to an all boys school, and they were like, no, of course you're not going to learn about textiles.
Yeah, it's one of the first things I taught myself when I moved in on my own.
Yeah.
I taught myself like how to all the basics of cooking, how to darn a sock, sew up a hole in an outfit, how to use a washing machine, how to just all the basic stuff you need for running a household.
Shout out to that time when I was probably about maybe like 19, so therefore my cousin would have been 16, 17. And I walked into him cutting a block of cheese in the kitchen, and he had a bread knife and was sawing it. And I was like, what are you doing? I don't know. I'm trying to cut a block of cheese, but I've never cut cheese before. I was like,
use a sharp knife, Dips. Use a cheese knife. It's like, what's a cheese knife? The long, thin one. Most of that is just common sense, right? Of like, what's going to cut through this solid object better? Clean cut. You don't saw through fucking cheese.
But my mind was just blown. Of like, my cousin had never really like stepped foot in a kitchen his entire life, and all like we were just on a family holiday, and it was like just saw them soaring through the block of cheese. I'm like, what are you doing?
It's just like learn some basic life skills, bro. Well, speaking of which,
obviously they have nowadays. I don't want to. Yeah. If my cousin ever happened to listen, I don't want to be calling them out too hard. But yeah, it was just funny.
It's like, just for all the guys out there who are like, no, I don't want to. It's like, it is one of the singular most attractive traits you can have is being self-sufficient. Like, my goal with my place that I live is it is immaculate. And when my cleaner comes over, she's like, I don't even know what to do in your place because it's so clean. Like, I don't want to be that. I'm not living that single guy stereotype.
That's the worst thing. Is like, I remember hiring a cleaner once, and we cleaned in preparation for the cleaner to come round, and it's like, I know that's not the point, but we were also. But I don't want someone to come round when it's dirty.
That's my cleaner. She does the stuff that's like I don't have the equipment to do it. Like she's got a steamer.
Yeah.
So like she gets like my grout on my tiles and stuff. But the house is kept clean. Everything is. I do my washing, my laundry. It's all done. All my pots. There's never any dirty pots out. The floors are always swept and clean. There is like I wear house slippers and stuff. So there's no scratches or anything. Because I don't want to be that nightmare ex you hear about who didn't wipe his ass.
I like how the only reason I know that you don't mean it that way, but Karl's saying like the only reason he does wipe his ass is so that other people don't call him out for it.
It's the same reason most people do everything, right?
Well, yeah, of course. That's society. That's how society works.
It's like the only reason I go to the gym is because I like eating like shit, but I don't want to look terrible because I want to look good because I want to be attractive, and I want to be attractive because I want to date attractive hot ladies, and they generally require you to have a level of personal achievement.
Just to clarify, yeah, Bethos in chat, like, is a cleaner a usual thing to have in the UK? No, but just it's become more common for like regular people. I think just in general, no matter what country, like to have very occasional cleaners come in like one day every now and then, just because it's like if someone's a working professional doesn't have the time to necessarily deep clean their own place, especially when a lot of couples are like professional couples and both people are working, like it's become a lot more common for like occasional cleaners every now and then.
Yeah, for me it's because my building has a service charge and you can opt into a cleaning service. So for the sake, like you pay like a little bit extra to get a cleaning service, and I just thought, well, if I own this place, I want to maintain it, and that'll require a specific level of like stuff that I wouldn't ordinarily do. Like, for example, steaming my shower to make sure it gets the grout, and having someone who comes like the snake to go down and make sure all the stuff gets like pull out the plug hole and stuff. But I don't have that equipment, but they do.
Also, just I know a lot of people say like, hey, I would make more money spending my time working and paying for a cleaner than I would cleaning the house myself and taking a day off. That kind of vibe as well, you know what I mean?
No, I never want to be in the house unless I don't work. I was the only time I've worked with my cleaners in the house was like last week. It's like, if you hear my voice come with me, I'm editing a video with my voice in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's definitely not a common thing, and as I say, we've done it like once and then felt too awkward, and it was like, and then say, oh, but they moved things to clean and then didn't put them back where they found them, so then we had to spend time reorganizing as well, and it's like we like wanted to clean and tidy before and after, so it wasn't worth it. But yeah,
it's handy for me. It's nice to know that, like, hey, I'm gonna, as well, to get someone else's eye there, someone who does it for a living. Like, is there anything that I should be keeping on top of? Like, don't worry, I've got you. Like, for example, like I said, just getting stuff like your grout in your bathrooms. Like, you can't really get that unless you get right fucking in there, or you have a steamer.
And things you don't think about, right, is like, you think a lot of the time, like, people would think, like, well, like, what? Make sure you clean after yourself, wash, like, you know, your clothes and your bedding and your towels and stuff like that. Clean up after yourself as you go. Mop your, like, brush and mop your floor. But a cleaner will come in and they'll notice, like, the more deep clean aspects that need doing every now and then.
Yeah. Now, the one for me is I've got, like, my oven. It's like the air filter. To get right fucking in there, it's like, when I came in, it's like, oh, that looks so fun. Like, it is, because like you get the soup, like the great.
Definitely not like a common thing that everyone in the UK has a clean. Don't be thinking that for sure.
Don't think I'm lazy either. I always do it. I do everything else myself. I say it's just once a month someone comes in and they get
I definitely don't see it as a sign of laziness. You clean up after yourself, Carl.
Every day. I could be like, that's the thing, the horror stories I hear is like, there's some people, they think because I'm coming in once a month, they don't have to clean for that entire month. They don't have like the bins out or anything. And they're there all day. Like, my clean is like, it's an hour and a half, and it's like most of that is just getting, like, moving furniture so they can mop the floors.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think we can leave it there. So thank you everyone for joining.
Shout out to cleaners as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'll take a bit of that credit because I now, you know, I'm back at cleaning a restaurant, I guess. I'm cleaning for people to eat.
I clean toilets for a living. So, women's toilets or in a nightclub.
I was doing a close the other week. Like, oh no, toilet's been flooded. Oh no, that's my job now.
I've been there.
Yeah. A luxury that we live through when we do this kind of thing. Yeah. Thank you all for watching. Everyone has a lovely day.
See you all next time.
I was signing off on my streams and I accidentally did it for Wiki Weekends, but oh well. Goodbye, everyone.
Cheers, everyone.